You getting a video there, big man? Okay, it should be going live here. All right, we're live. Whee! I think so. I'm here with Tom Kennedy, my campaign manager and good friend. We're going to be talking about the campaign we ran a little, and then maybe some kind of current events. And I guess the important thing to start with is I'm always trying to get people on the channel that don't agree with me on everything. And I think Tom's a good representation of that. I'm registered Republican, you're registered Democrat. Mm-hmm. Though I would think we would both consider ourselves at least closer to the center in that we would both be willing to vote for people with, we're not going to just toe party lines.
Yeah, I agree with that.
So I think it'll be good to talk about that. So we don't have anything really formal set up, and we're just trying to, like, the camera angles and things like that, we're just setting up. That's why we're a little late, because I'm a meathead and I had trouble with it. So yeah, I guess let's talk about the campaign. For those of you who don't know, I ran for Congress in District 12, special election. Tom was my campaign manager. The seat got available because the gentleman that had the seat ended up having an illness, so there had to be a special election. There wasn't a primary, instead it was a conferee process, and we went through that, and we made it to the second round of the candidates. Out of 24, I think originally, we made it to the top 10, and that's where we were defeated. So I thought it was an interesting process, and I learned a lot about politics through it. But what were your impressions, I guess, kind of the thing as a whole? Did it change your feelings on how politics are ran one way or the other?
Well, it was interesting. I thought at least early on, before the actual the actual convention or whatever, or conference or whatever, I thought it was very interesting, and talking to people and you talking to people and just getting a feel for how people thought. I thought that they were more receptive than I think in the end they might have been. Yeah. To different ideas, but maybe they were receptive, and it's just they are also receptive to other arguments too.
Yeah, I mean, on that line, it kind of, some of the stuff that happened, it actually made me feel better about the political process, and some of the stuff, it was like, oh, yeah, that's like. By the way, if you guys hear, my moron dogs are down here playing with toys and stuff, so if you hear anything like that. So one of the things that I thought that even sometimes when we'd be discussing issues with people, for those of you who don't know, District 12 is kind of the most conservative district in Pennsylvania.
Is it more than this district?
Yeah, I think so.
All right.
Yeah, and just to give you an idea, a Democrat's chance of winning an election for Congress in District 12 is less than Trump's chance of winning California. Like, and everyone would say, yeah, Trump's not. Yeah, because I think Trump got like 30-something%.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
And the results of the special election were what? It was like 75-25 almost.
Yeah, it was something pretty crazy. It was more than it was before. Yeah. I was going to say it was probably about 40% difference.
So the guy that won, Fred Keller...
67-33?
Yeah, something like that. The guy that won, Fred Keller, who beat me, ended up easily winning the district. So he is now officially a congressman. That's how it ended up. So, being as conservative as it was, there were a lot of people that didn't like some of the issues we had. Gay marriage or abortion. Now, I consider myself pro-life, but I also am not a life begins at conception person. Anyways, not really to get into now. But I found that a lot of people, they would say, well, maybe I would go with someone who represents my voices on these issues better. But they were still willing to hear you out. And They were polite about it. And a lot of them were like, well, if my preferred person goes out, I would vote for you. So I thought that gave me some optimism that people aren't as extreme as you're led to believe, I thought. So.
Yeah, I definitely think that too, that people weren't, as somebody who normally doesn't, so the people that we were dealing with, I live in the district, but I live in State College, which is a Democratic town. It is the biggest city or town or whatever you want to call it in the district, but it's also the only one probably that is, the only county I think that was Democratic probably in the election.
Yeah.
But it's also a small portion of the district. So I'm used to dealing with more people that either are liberal because they live there, or are more what I expect to be more moderate because they live with a lot of liberal people. Right. So I was expecting more people that I had trouble with because they were super conservative or they were not willing to listen or something like that. And I don't think that's how it was at all. I think it was a good educational experience for me to deal with, to work with people, and they were just regular people just like everybody else.
Yeah, and I think that
Which
know,
was actually part of what you were running on too, right? Like
Right.
that regular people are normal people, and that's what we should do. And it's always good, I think, to talk with people that you don't normally deal with.
right? Yeah, I thought that. Must you? Can't you play with the toy? It doesn't make sound. But I thought that it does show. It kind of shows the problem with our media and with our national politics.
Yeah.
Kind of the voices on the extremes of both sides kind of seem to be the loudest voices. You know, yes, there were people that's big issue was abortion. I understand that on either side of the issue. Again, I identify more as pro-life, but I get. Whatever your take on that issue is, you're either thinking could be an attack on women's rights or it's killing babies, and so that's high stakes. I get that. But fix this while I can. Go ahead.
No one was particularly rude
No.
that we met or anything like that. They would disagree with you
Right.
on things, but
I still think the overwhelming people, their issues that they were most focused on, they might have a take on that, but they were like, we're concerned about jobs. We're concerned about, what's going to help our area, rural Pennsylvania, and things like that better for the future. And so they were open to discuss. They would still be willing to hear you out. We're led to believe like, oh, everyone's pro-life or pro-choice and nothing else you say matters. That's not the case at all. So I thought that was a good thing.
And I guess I don't know. Well, never mind. I was gonna go back to the abortion thing, but I think it's just, and I think that's something that as everybody seems to be completely ridiculous with it now. Like you had New York while you were running, I think, or maybe it was right before you started. Then New York passed all that law that went pretty far, and now people like Alabama, or not people, but states like Alabama and Missouri and things like that, doing the complete. It was like, to me as a Democrat, when the Democrats did that in New York and celebrated and made a huge deal about it, I was like, well, that's kind of seems like you're rubbing people's noses in it, and it's gonna go bad. And then I was like, I think that's bad long term for them. But then the Republicans in Alabama and other places did the same thing the other way, and I was like, well, now everybody's going to be fired up on both sides.
See, to me, the abortion issue is always.
There's no room for moderation, even though that's
There's
where
nowhere, but it's
90% of the country.
To me, it was all the problem with it's a process issue, which only nerds like us are concerned with.
Yeah.
But I don't feel the Supreme Court had any right whatsoever to claim that Roe v. Wade decision had to do with the Fourth Amendment dealing with abortion. I feel the same way about the Casey decision in '92. I thought they were bad decisions. To me, it should be left up to the states. I'm a big federalist person. Ironically, though, if you leave it up to the states and it proceeds as we're seeing, kind of the pro-choice people basically win. Because even if 30 states outlaw all abortion, there's nothing that says you can't go to those other 20 states and get the abortion.
Well, they did pass that in the one state. Was that Alabama or Georgia? One of them. They tried to put that in.
Well, that's
in the law that you're not. That if,
and I think that law went too far, anyways. But that's clearly nonsense.
But I'm just saying.
But I mean, you're absolutely right. There's going to be this tit for tat, and it's kind of that's one of the things we ran on was the importance for civility. Look, there are people in the establishment Democratic Party, for example, that I really dislike. But I also understand that people that vote for them have good reasons, even if it's not reasons I agree with. And you're never going to bring the country together or have successful policy if you just say, oh, everyone who disagrees with me is evil or they're crappy or, That could be true. I believe there's a lot of corrupt politicians. I do believe that. But I don't think that the people voting for them, and that's why I think it's a mistake if you want to deal with, Ocasio-Cortez, or you want to deal with Ted Cruz or Mitch McConnell or Donald Trump, whatever, to just be like, they're the worst, they're Hitler, and everyone who likes them is a terrible person. You're never going to make headway. And I think the abortion debate, we're seeing exactly why that's the case. Oh, you want to do something extreme? Fine. We'll do something extreme. So
you're only going to convince the people that already agree with you, and anybody that might have agreed with you will now think that you're extremist.
Right. I think that's why I favor an amendment. I really do. I think that the Constitution didn't discuss it. I think that there needs to be some kind of amendment that says this is the guidance on abortion law, that, it can never be given after this date. It could always be offered until this date, and within those parameters, states can decide what they want to do themselves. That would be but not that I really wanted to talk about abortion, but that was an issue that was, a lot of people were focused on. Some of the things that disappointed me, and I'm sure you share my thoughts on these, it was very cliquey. I mean, I thought that a lot of the people we met that were running, There were two kinds of lanes. There were the people like us that were basically new to the process. And then there were the people that were career politicians at a lower level, like at the state level or maybe even municipality level. And with the people that were involved, it was cliquey. You can understand to a sense because they all knew each other, but it felt like, I didn't really talk about it much, but there were a lot of events we weren't invited to. And that was devastating to us because our strong suit is when we talk to people face to face, I think people could see that we, I don't...
You, yeah.
Well, but I think both of us, I think as a team, even Courtney, my wife that helped us out, we're genuine. And I think that we had more sophisticated plans than almost any, like we had week by week what we would do to win an election, exactly what our policies would be. We had technology set up to talk to people as intimately as possible, whether it be through video like this, phone calls, meeting in person, and things like that. And I think that I had a more nuanced view, and I think that I'll say this without trying to brag too much. We were at least in the very top tier of actually understanding the policies that we talked about.
Yeah.
And so when we weren't offered the chance...
But we've been arguing them for 20 years.
Right. Well, that's exactly it. As debaters, that's what we did. So our weak suit was on paper. Like, what's our record? Now, for me, as someone who doesn't particularly like career politicians, it's like, good, that's a strong suit. But nonetheless. And so when we weren't invited to some of those events... I think that...
And the people are voting are the people who normally know the career politicians.
Right.
At events, so.
Which is fine.
Yeah.
I mean, my take on it was, my job as someone running for office is to be honest, and this is what I believe, and your job as someone who's voting is to get informed to the best of your ability. Or, I'm not saying you have to sit there every night for 2 hours a night, but
right.
find an issue or two you like, and then choose the person based on your informing yourself. That's how the process is supposed to work. So, if people chose you want someone with experience, that's fine. But I don't think that should have kept us off the stage to have our ideas heard. Some of that I thought was a little shady. I don't know. And you try not to, you understand, like some of the people flat out told me because I wasn't from the district that I wasn't invited to some of these events. That's fine. But thought...
then they also should have been straightforward with you about that from the beginning.
That's right. So I ended up getting invited to 5 events and I attended 4. And I would have attended the 5th, but it was on the exact same time as... but everyone that allowed us to come, I thought was gracious, gave us a fair shake when we were there. But it wasn't until afterwards that I kind of started to see. And there was other little things. Apparently someone said that someone had mentioned to them that, and it kind of working for one of the candidates, that I had never voted. There was no record of me ever voting.
Oh, is that true?
That's what someone said. And I was like, well, maybe they looked it up and spelled my name wrong or something, but...
They did spell your name wrong on a couple
of
things.
So it could have been that, but there were a couple people that were like, hey, you seem to be very interested in politics, why haven't you voted? And I was like, I do vote, like in almost all the national elections. So, stuff like that. And then, the big thing was, at the convention, the one, I'm not going to use names, but the one gentleman dropping out. And there was kind of shady behind the scenes.
I actually think that hurt. I mean, looking at it in retrospective, I don't think you were going to win.
Oh, no.
But going in, I think what we wanted to have happen was that he would have still been around. And there would have been several of these career politicians left. And we were kind of under the impression that some of the people that liked him really didn't like the other guy. And some of the people that ended up liking him really hated the other guy.
Right.
And that was kind of what we were hoping for them to step in and be like here's some alternative guy that
yeah, I mean, in a gamesmanship,
and that was prevented from that.
I mean, ultimately we knew the chances of us winning were low, and we just wanted to run the campaign the way we wanted to run it and get our message out. I think it was very successful in that way.
Yeah,
the gamesmanship level of it, though, we knew the best chance we had to win was to break the top 10, and then if they would have had a system where it was like one at a time, people went out. But the problem was it went from 10 right to 4.
Yeah.
So our only chance was to see enough people peel off, because I thought we were a lot of people's second choice. Or we could have been it, even if we weren't. But that was our best chance. We weren't going to be a lot of people's first choice. And that was one of the things... I don't begrudge anyone who voted, any of the conferees. And hopefully they made a good choice, and Keller, that's the representative, does a good job. But one of the things that was discouraging is there were a lot of people who had made up their mind from the get-go before they heard anyone else. And that's okay, because a lot of the people, let's say you're in a county and you've been involved in county politics your whole life, and then this guy you've known your whole life's now running for Congress. You're probably going to vote for that guy. And so it was going to be hard to crack that. And so our best chance was people to say, well, I'm going to vote for this guy, but if he gets out, then maybe I would consider voting for you.
And a lot of people were pretty straightforward with that.
Yes.
But then there were some people that acted like
Right.
they were really interested, and then it turns out that they were really just going to vote for
Right.
whoever they were going to vote for.
And then, there were some people that, there was accusations that some of the candidates got to help pick the conferees. The conferees were the people that were voting. So there was some, so basically you pick the people that will decide whether or not to vote for you.
Wow.
So, but I mean, I don't know how you would fix that system.
I mean, they had 200 some people from
Right.
the Republic. They all were going to know one another,
Right. So, I mean,
You get what you get there.
Yeah, it ended up, we made it to the second round. I thought that was good. I could be wrong. Obviously, I'm biased. But I feel like I gave the best speech there. I thought it got the most positive reaction.
To me, you were the best. I would imagine to a neutral observer, you had to be in the top 2 for sure.
Yeah.
Certainly the funniest.
The woman candidate, I thought did a very good job, too. She had a lot of personality. And I've talked with someone who worked with her who's really helped me out a lot, too. And I think the thing that we both had was that we were genuine. A lot of the people it's like we talked about this. It was like Al Gore's his concession speech,
Right.
where everyone was like, "Oh man,
That was weird how that came up multiple
yeah,
times.
right." Where Gore's concession speech, it was the first time where it was like, "Hey, he sounds like a regular person,
Right.
like someone you could
Why
have a
didn't he just do
conversation."
this the whole
yeah,
election?
instead of sounding like a robot. And I thought, and that has a lot to do with public speaking in general. That's just something we're used to. But a lot of these people, when they got up there, they kind of defaulted to this kind of memorized kind of laundry list of things they wanted to say, and they didn't come off as an individual. And I thought that coming off as an individual would have helped. Having said that,
even in person, some people
yes
were very still robotic, and it was
Yes.
like, this is kind of... It
And
struck me as weird.
Which, it's not... What made it weird then was, it would be like, when they were just talking to me in person, they were fine. You were like, oh, okay. But then when they would talk in front of people, or even face-to-face with a vote, it was like the demeanor changes when it's a voter. And, my advice would be not to do that. Now, having said that, it didn't matter, because the people that we thought gave the best speeches didn't win anyways.
Right.
Not that the people that won or did good gave poor speeches. I'm not saying that. I mean, to each their own. But that was just my feelings on it. The process itself, when we were there, I thought everyone was nice to us there. I thought that was fine. If I had to say one thing that I would kind of criticize a little at the end is, see, the reason I got involved in the first place was that I feel like, people like me and you will have conversations sitting around or sitting at the bar. We're talking about politics, we're talking about sports, or I'm online, blogs, or I'm doing YouTube videos. But sometimes people will levy the criticism, which is true, like, well, what are you doing to change things? It's like, okay, fair enough. We might have visitors, I don't know. But anyways, so I was like, well, the heck with it, I'll run. And I didn't take money, and it actually cost me a decent amount of money. And it certainly cost all of us a lot of time and energy. But I had fun, I learned a lot, I'm not regretting any of that. But we made a lot of connections there. And people talked a big talk like, oh, we would like you to be involved. We want people like you, people that aren't career politicians, to be involved. Mm-hmm. And so I've done a decent amount of work trying to keep in touch with people. And I don't mean the average conferee. I'm not talking about them. I'm talking about more of the people that are involved in the political level, like in the party. I've sent emails. I've called numbers. Not a word. No one's responded to me. Now, I'm not trying to sound like sour grapes, but I'm just trying to say, in general, it doesn't matter if they ever get in touch with me. I don't care. But both parties, and being biased that I'm Republican, if the Republican Party wants to do well, you better start reaching people like this. Hey, 1 second. Hey, what's up? We're doing a live stream, but you can come in.
Oh, no.
Okay, what are you guys up to?
Just seeing what you guys want to do for supper tonight.
Oh, I don't care. You on camera? Do you want to wave?
Hi.
We can take a break for a minute. Hey, I'll be right back. I'm just going to take a quick minute, okay? Let's see. Yeah, no problem at all. She's getting along with him. Well,
She'll probably pee on something.
yeah, that's fine. The other ones, join the party.
See you after bed. Love
All
you.
right, we'll see you. I think we should get going here in a second. That's funny. I didn't know, though. It takes a while to sometimes. It seems like there's a delay. That was funny. I sit here every Friday. No one visits me.
Mm-hmm.
See, no, I can't tell if it's on or off. It looks like it's not running, but
It doesn't look like it's on.
the encoder says it's streaming.
I can try to
I can just
navigate.
1 second here. Let's try this.
Oh, the computer's taken off.
Yeah,
It says we're live.
that's something I actually was going to talk to you about. Like it's
Oh, video was interrupted though, so maybe.
it says streaming. Can anyone see me and hear me? Viewers are coming back on, which would lead you.
Well, I'm
to-
one of them, trying to see if it's running.
Oh. Probably not.
But it says video was interrupted. The stream stopped.
Okay. Let's do this.
Oh, did you just do something? Because now it's yeah. Oh, I think you're on now.
Right?
Yeah.
Okay, now it should be working. Let me know when you see it come on.
Oh,
But I bet it's. Hey! Oh, my goodness. Oh! Are you kidding me? You're on your own for a second, Tom.
all right.
I got puppy mess.
Puppy mess.
Yeah.
Uh-oh.
Nana comes over and everything just falls apart. Now, hopefully, it
I
should-
think we're back now.
we're back.
I think we were back, but no, I think puppy mess made the cut, but that's okay.
Okay, that's fine. So hopefully we're back. If anyone can hear, if you're one of the people watching, if you could just type something if you could see or hear us, because see how it won't. Now it acts like on my computer it won't show up.
Yeah.
But whatever, we'll assume it's working.
All right.
If not, we'll be talking to ourselves, which is fine.
I can pick it
anyways.
back up on my phone and check.
Nah, I think we'll be
All right.
So, if you are watching and you hear this, just let us know. Oh, there's Chirp. Oh, I don't know if I don't think saying his name would hurt anything. Anyways, so we were just talking. Yeah, it just seemed like a lot of people expressed interest in getting regular people involved in the process. Again,
Yeah.
and I'm not saying sour grapes like, oh, because I wasn't called or people didn't respond. But I'm saying,
Well, they were all very insistent that we stick with it and stick around and that we do stuff with them.
Right.
And then for you to reach out after that, which you would think they would want, even if they didn't want you winning, even if they actively wanted you not to win.
right.
You would think they would want new people, and you would think that they would the party itself would do a better job of trying to make sure that they get more people engaged
We're right. And the
who
problem.
are willing to do stuff.
Well, they were all very insistent.
Oh, yeah. We're working.
Yep, it shows up over there now too.
Oh, good. Yeah, so, and it's a mistake. It's a mistake for either party. Like, again, I'm looking at things, how do I help the Republican Party? Not that I'm a party first person. I'm definitely a country first person. And I also understand you need at least 2 vibrant parties, maybe more. But there's a lot of things happening that I really don't like in the establishment Democratic Party at this point. So that's why, I favor the Republicans. But both need to be reaching out to more regular people.
Yeah.
And you're starting to see what happens when you have an insulated political class that's unwilling on both sides to even engage average people or the other side. You end up with more and more extreme rhetoric. And so I was just a little disappointed because when you're talking to these people, even that are involved in politics, some of which were at a national level, Congress people, and they're very encouraging and seem down to earth and willing, and I understand they have busy lives or whatever, but when you have a difficulty even getting an email response back, it just seems like, okay, maybe you're just a really good good talker. You're good at telling people what they want to hear, which I know all about. So,
It's true.
But that was it. That was the campaign, and obviously there was a lot more nuance that went on. But in a nutshell, I think that's what's going on. So I learned a lot about the process. I learned that it's even at that, it was cutthroat. I mean, there were people there were flyers going around discouraging some. Nothing was negatively really said about us,
Right.
but
At
we
least
weren't
that
on
we know
anyone's
about.
radar,
Yeah.
right? So.
But that's also like a common political thing when you look at it when there's lots of candidates in the thing. Generally, they tell you not to attack people that are
Right,
go,
don't punch down.
You want to, you attack the big boy,
Right.
or whatever,
So,
or girl.
but that was the that was what was going on there. So, I guess while we're talking about elections, we could talk about like the Democratic debates coming up. So, as a Democrat, do you have someone that, not that you're necessarily made up your mind, but that it's a front runner for you?
Well, right now I like Buttigieg.
Okay.
I'm interested to see what he has to say in the debates. He is kind of like, I think he's smart. He's not like us in that he's not like a policy. He doesn't seem. He's more like a vision type guy, which is okay.
Well, he admitted as much. Like,
Right,
someone
yeah.
asked him, like, hey, where are we going to see specific policy proposals? And he was like, well, it's more important basically to get myself out there.
Right, which I believe, and I think that was good, but I don't think that's going to get him over the hump.
I
would like to see some substance.
Right.
Hopefully.
I'm kind of less, very. Well, I can't say that because I didn't necessarily vote for Trump because of specific policy proposals.
Well, but
I guess it was more.
He did have specific things that he talked about, whether or not they were very well thought through. He had specific things like build the wall was a thing,
right.
and the
yeah,
whether you agreed. And
right, that's absolutely
tariffs.
But I guess my big reason for voting for him was just that I thought he was a potential outsider.
Yeah.
I don't see any of that in the Democratic Party except Tulsi Gabbard, maybe Andrew Young, that are potential outsiders. I don't think
Buttigieg could kind of be an outsider,
but I think he's getting a lot of love from the kind of the establishment, like the mainstream media. The people like it's
But they got nothing better to talk about 18 months before.
The
presidential election.
And I do prefer I wish he had more policy specifics. But he certainly has time to get to them.
And if mainstream media coverage is the line that you're using for, then that doesn't work because Trump got.
Well, yeah, but he was lambasted.
Right, I know, but I'm just saying he got coverage.
Yeah. The only problems I have with Buttigieg, again, there's not been a lot of specific policy, but it's the same problem I have with almost the entirety of the Democratic field, and I understand why it's happening, is that they're so extreme on certain issues, like immigration or abortion, or like now the big thing I just did a video on yesterday was like reparations, and it's like, I understand you have to do it. I get that. And that's going to be the game. The game's going to be go to as far as the left as you can, win the nomination, and then come to as close to the center as you can. Like that's, and if you're someone who's watching and you're really into progressive politics and you're into what I negatively connotate as identity politics, that's fine if that's what you're into. And you might think, wow, there's a lot of people to choose from. Don't be surprised when they start to run from that, I think, in the general election, because I don't think it's a winning argument for a lot of moderates and centrists.
It depends who it is. I mean, I'm not for Warren, but I would imagine that what we're hearing from Warren is what we would hear in the real election.
Yeah, I mean, that's true.
For the most part. I think, but that's because she's a policy. I keep saying policy wonk. I don't know if that's actually a real term. Or if
I don't know. People say it.
Oh, do they? Okay, it's not just us.
No.
Okay. Which is what you were, and that's what
Right.
I would be too, probably. Regardless of whether I agree with her, she does have policies, and I assume that she would stick with them.
Yeah, and
same with Bernie. I mean, Bernie's kind of
right, and that is something that I like about for example, I thought this was an insane thing for Bernie to do, but at the one town hall where that woman asked him like, "You're for felons voting." Well, like here in Boston, we have the Boston bomber, that bombed the marathon. Do you think he should be allowed to vote? And Bernie's like, "Oh, absolutely." It's like that's crazy, and that's like, wow, you really think that? But he had to know he'd get flack. At least like. There's something to be said about even sticking to an unpopular position, knowing that it'll be unpopular, and so that it seems more principled. Now there are things about Bernie that I find unprincipled, such as criticisms about tax rates and millionaires while he's paying low taxes as a millionaire. And things like that. But at least that was something he stood on. You compare that to like Gillibrand is like the exact opposite of that, or I think Biden's starting to come off as this, where. They'll change at a moment's notice. I mean, Biden's changing his stance on the Hyde Amendment. 40 years of policy that he defended. He defends it one day. He supposedly gets a call from Alyssa Milano and says, "My bad, I've been wrong for 40 years. I now have not just a slightly more nuanced position, I have the exact opposite position that I had yesterday based on a conversation with Melissa Milano." It's like, I do think you're right. Like, it seems like Elizabeth Warren, although she's certainly changed. Like Elizabeth Warren, when she was a Harvard professor, she was kind of like, she was writing books about the importance of family and like individuality and things like that. So she certainly changed for them. But I don't mind a gradual change. What I mind is
overnight.
because it's like you're pandering. That's exactly what's happening. Gillibrand's
And
like the queen.
Biden could have done that anytime he was vice president,
Right.
Or like the last 3 years,
Right. Yeah. It's
instead of waiting like a month into his campaign to do it.
Yeah, and then that's kind of an issue I have. I think, and don't get me wrong, I'm not naive. I know that the Republican side would do that. People running as Republicans would do the same thing. If all of a sudden something becomes, I don't think this is the Republican issue right now, although it's painted. But if it was, I think most people on the Republican side, when it came to things like the Dreamers, most average voters were like, well, yeah, they should probably be allowed to stay. Maybe not full citizenship, but there were very few people like round everyone up that's illegal and ship them back tomorrow. But if that became the position tomorrow, there would be a Republican primary with a bunch of Republicans saying, yeah, right. There, you'd have a couple people in principle being like, no. But most of them would be like, yeah, I've wanted to round them up for years. You know, that's how it would be. And so it's sad to see. It's not just a Democrat thing.
Right.
It's a politics thing. But it's just crappy to see it. It's like, come on now. You know, people that the Democrats have moved so far to the left in such a short amount of time. I mean, Obama and Hillary Clinton's policies on immigration and like gay marriage 8 years ago are now not only just considered wrong, it's considered bigoted. And it just seems like, I don't know. It seems like a crazy fast direction. And, you know, if you're a Democrat or you're a progressive and you're okay with that, just remember there will be an equal and opposite reaction. And that's what you're saying with the abortion. When the moderates...
And there will be people that are moderate in the Senate that it's putting off.
Right, that's exactly it.
If you know that going in and you're like, well, that's what I really think should happen, then okay.
Right.
But you should know that, like, if you're out there bashing Biden or something like that because you're like, oh, how could anybody ever support a moderate? You might lose.
Yeah, I mean, my feelings on the election is this. One, if the economy tanks in any way, Trump loses. Like, it's that simple. I think that it's kind of ridiculous. I think that any Republican, but Trump to the max, is facing an incredible uphill battle because our public discourse is dominated by institutions that are established with Democrats.
Do you think the economy will matter that much for him?
Yeah, because I think there'll be a lot of people, if the economy starts to slide and like a lot of people in these Rust Belt states start to like really suffer financially, that they won't turn out as much. I really do think that's the case. Mm-hmm. And so, and having said that, I think what Trump's done has been good for the economy and he deserves credit. However, and it's partially his fault, but definitely not wholly his fault, we're going to see another financial crash.
Yeah.
It's just going to happen. They didn't solve anything that led to the 2008 financial crash. Nothing.
Plus,
it's just
would just happen anyway.
Yeah, well, right. It's always going to, yes. But the bubble keeps being inflated, and everybody, if you have any, like, understanding of what led to that 2008 crisis, no one went to jail. The mortgage company, the bank industry, they're doing the same shady practices. There's no punishment. There's huge rewards when it's going. So if there's no punishment, what incentive do you have not to keep doing it? So we'll see it again. And it is Trump's at the helm now.
Is anybody even talking about that at this point?
No one.
Bernie, he was talking about that in 2016.
But the problem is they conflate, like...
But I don't know if he is now.
Right, and we were talking about this earlier. I think the problem is they conflate those actual things that we should be discussing with just, you're rich, that's better. Like, they talk about the wealth gap in general, which is important to, the wealth gap, it's an important topic to talk about. I don't think it's as cut and dry as they'd have you believe. Everyone at the top's crappy. But the problem is when you start to engage in that type of dialogue, you lose sight of the real abuses. And I think that's what's happening. Bernie, was talking about it more in 2016. But what are we talking about now? And what you hear them talk about, they'll talk about...
of course, now he's a millionaire.
Right. They'll talk about the wealth gap. They'll talk about tax cuts for the rich. They'll talk about, what's the name of that court decision? Lobbying. They always bring up, you hear them talk, not Glass-Steagall,
Oh yeah, I know the one that he always bring up. Oh.
And then when they talk about that stuff, but they lose sight of those are all very nuanced discussions. Like these abuses occurring in the financial sector, that's not very nuanced.
Right.
We know we could point to people that basically scammed this country, scammed poor people, and walked away scot-free and are still operating at the heads of the financial sector. And even though Trump didn't start it, here's where he's culpable. One, he's in charge now and can take steps to fix it, and he didn't. And second, a lot of those people ended up in his administration. Yeah. So, hey, I know there'll be, if it happens in the next 2 years, there'll be a lot of Trump fans out there saying, not Trump's fault, not Trump's fault. And I'll be one of the people who supports Trump who will be saying, hey, I said from the get-go when Trump came out and was like, stock market, When he linked the success of the economy to the stock market, it's like, okay, you're making a huge mistake. Because then if the stock market goes down, you don't get to say, well, that doesn't matter. That's not a real measure.
Right.
You claimed it, big boy, so you know.
Did you see yesterday he claimed it twice?
Yeah.
It was the biggest open ever, and then it was the biggest close ever.
Yeah. It's
Like, yeah, that's how that normally works.
That's funny, yeah. But, you know, so that's my feelings. But again, I will say Trump fights an uphill battle more than any president, at least in my lifetime before him, in that everybody that's kind of the gatekeepers of the public discourse hate him so much. And so...
A lot of that's of his own making.
Well, yeah, but it's... but sometimes not. Like, for example, this. I saw polls, which take polls with a grain of salt, obviously, but it's like around 50% of people believe that he conspired with Russia to steal the 2016 election. I mean, we just had a 2-year investigation. It's like, no, not at all. Not Trump, not anyone on Trump's team, not any American. And so you could say, well, the guy sucks and he was willing to take information from Russians or blah, blah, blah. You could say all that. Okay, fine. But half the public thinks that the guy conspired with Russia, and there's literally, he's basically, you know, one of the things that was funny with the Mueller report, when they said, the second part of it, when they said, well, we couldn't exonerate him from obstruction, isn't that kind of an implicit exoneration of the first charge then? Right? Because they're like, well, with no one broke the law with Russia stealing the election. But with obstruction, we can't exonerate him. So you've basically said without saying, we exonerate him from the charge of Russia collusion. Someone who, in my opinion, clearly hated Trump and had every incentive to nail Trump to the wall, couldn't even do it. And so with things like that, you know, and yeah, Trump's big mouth gets him in trouble. But like, you know, the big thing like these detention centers, not a word breathed when Obama did it. Well, Trump did it, now it's the most evil thing in the world. And it's constantly like that, you know. And that's what I think. It's just like he doesn't get a fair shake. And the Republicans have always been fighting that uphill battle, but you know, I feel like that discourse is so bad. You know, like you talk to anyone, Trump hates gay people. What has he done? I don't know. Like I ask people, like I don't know. I just don't get it. So, anyways, I'm just rambling on. But
Pence, I guess people would say Pence would be the argument, right?
Well, yeah. I mean, I get it. Like, and don't get me wrong.
But Pence isn't also in charge of anything. He's the vice president.
Right. I mean, I don't know. Did Obama, like, was he culpable for Biden rubbing girls' shoulders? No.
Well, no, but you know what I mean.
Yeah.
Like, he picked Pence, who had a
Yeah.
specific position that was...
Yeah.
You know.
It's funny. By the way, Pence, it's funny, right? Everyone laughed at him for being like, well, I won't, like, talk to women without my wife there, you know, stuff like that. And now all of a sudden it's like, that might be sound policy, like, moving forward. I thought that issue was kind of funny.
Well, does he still refer to his wife as mother?
I don't know. That's
kind of weird.
Yeah. But, yeah, so I don't know. We'll see. I mean, it's still so early. My feeling with the Democrats are, you know, Biden's going to be a player until the end. Unless anyone barring some crazy
He's got the money.
Right.
Well, they would have to coalesce around somebody else quickly.
Right.
I mean,
I think Buttigieg
like,
has a
I'm
chance.
not saying like today, but like by like February or March next year, they have to have somebody that has more support. I think he's going to have a good 30 at least % support for a long time.
I mean, if you're one of these progressive Democrats, like if you were a Bernie bro, you know, and Biden gets picked, what's that do? Is it lower turnout from that crowd? Or are enough people just angry at Trump that they're still like, well, I'll still swallow the pill and vote for Biden? I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know. Well, some of them didn't show up in 2016.
And then the opposite is, you know, you're some union member. You know, you don't care about reparations. You kind of would like to see something done about legal immigration. You know, but then Warren gets picked, or, you know, Bernie. Are you like, ugh? I just don't know. I mean, it's very simple.
The people, from what I can sense from most people who are really a liberal or Democrat, their primary goal seems to be that they want to beat Trump.
Yeah.
Which is fine. That's a reasonable goal to have, I think, if you're a Democrat. But then they shouldn't be bashing one another. Right. They should be, like, specifically Biden and Bernie are both getting from people, just regular people on the internet, just, like, trying to, like, throw stuff at him to get him... I don't know to what end. They're not going to, like, drop out this week or something because you said something that maybe made their percentage drop a point.
I mean, to me, as someone who's not a Democrat, one, and we talked about this earlier, I'm still always going to be a country first person. If Bernie wins or Booker or Warren or Buttigieg, I hope, even though I think they would not do a good job, I hope they prove me wrong. I would cheer for them as a president, no matter who wins. I would, just to get that out of the way. But there is a little bit of Schadenfreude that I see, kind of the identity politics that's sprung up on the left. We used to see it in debate, like in academia, which, for those of you who don't know, like policy debate's the left of the left. What we saw in 2004 has kind of become the mainstream, like, and it was bad then and it's bad now. I can only imagine what debate is now. If the mainstream's gone that far left, who knows? Maybe the pendulum swung back in debate. I doubt. I've heard the community's not doing so well. So, but, you know, you play with fire. Like, now Biden's getting, like, you know, well, Biden's basically talking about the importance of civility, something that I share. And he brings up that he worked with 2 segregationists. And everyone's like, oh my goodness, you know, and they're attacking Biden for this.
Yeah.
And the problem's like,
no,
I mean, it's stupid.
It was a dumb way to say it.
Right. But I get what he was trying. I think his point was, you can even work with people that you vehemently. Clearly, he's not defending segregation.
Right. But to his point too, they would have attacked. A lot of these people would have attacked him for his point, even if he had made it well, because they don't think we should be civil.
Right, which is ridiculous.
I agree.
But the people, like Biden was at one of the positions of the helm while this was getting worse and worse.
Right.
And that's why you can only, you know, at some point you just have to say, like, see, we told you this monster would come after you. You know, with all these, you know, I don't know how much you followed, kind of, they call it like the adpocalypse or whatever, where people are getting demonetized on YouTube. You know, and it starts with this guy from Vox, and he's basically kind of like Steven Crowder. And so they're like, oh, okay, then we'll demonetize Crowder. But then a bunch of people that literally have nothing to do with that get demonetized. Because when you're dealing with things like that, you're painting in broad strokes. So then the nuance is lost. And then people are dismayed, like, how could this happen? Well, that's what happens when you have, that's why we have free speech. You know, once you start to say, I don't like this, get rid of it, well, then it's going to be used against you at some point. And so you can't help but kind of look at Biden and be like, you know, so, you know, everybody wanted to jump on, you know, Trump. The Bidens of the world would jump on Trump for his, you know, grab him by the P word comment. Well, when there's a bunch of videos out there of you rubbing little girls' shoulders, it's going to get brought up. I think Biden's just a weirdo. I don't think that proves that he's, like, got any sexual attraction to kids or anything like that. He just seems like we know people that are, like, shoulder rubbers. Right. You know, it's just the way it is. But I would not vote for Biden because of that. However, you could understand, like, you kind of created this. Everyone was okay with this when it was going after their. But, by the way, I felt the same way about Al Franken.
Yeah.
I thought it was a photo in bad taste. I didn't think that it was sexual assault.
Also, I believe he was a comedian at the time.
He was. Yes.
Not a politician.
But they would say if he groped a woman's breast while she was sleeping, that wouldn't matter.
Yeah.
I didn't see him groping based on that picture, by the way. It looked like he was close, but he was mocking. Like,
I don't remember it well enough. I remember the picture, but I don't remember well enough the arguments at the time.
You know, the woman said she felt, when she saw the picture, she felt terrible, which, you know, that's fine. But I'm just saying, I felt like, look, it was a joke. You may have thought it was gross. I don't think that's a reason to ruin someone's. If they give what you deem to be a reasonable, like a heartfelt apology, which I think that Al Franken. Yeah. I have no love for Al Franken, by the way.
I mean, I think that's the point of a campaign. It's if it had come out and afterwards and people were that upset about it and they didn't want to vote for him, then they should have not been reelected.
Right.
I don't think he should have been. I guess he technically resigned. He wasn't actually kicked out, but I don't think they should have even.
Now, clearly, if it's like a credible, like, you're going on trial for rape or something.
Sure,
I could see,
but then you're going to prison, or you have a chance.
But we're incentivized. I mean, you saw it with this Kyle Kashoff kid that, you know, they found his Discord server or something in high school. He said the N word or whatever. Now that Harvard rescinded, it's like, is that the world we want to go down?
I mean, I think that's, to be fair, Harvard's right.
Well, Harvard racially discriminates for real.
I didn't say I like Harvard. I just said I think it's Harvard's right to do.
It's their right. I thought you said they are right. No, it's definitely their right. Of course, they can accept whoever they want. But, you know, it's just stupid. The guy that won the Heisman, did you see that? Like, last year, they found, like, a tweet of his when he was 14, like, saying a slur for homosexual or something. It's like...
Was that the Alabama quarterback?
Was it him or was it the guy before? I can't remember.
I don't remember.
But nonetheless, I just remember thinking, like, oh, come on. It's pretty much the high point in this guy's life. You gotta, like, crap on... It just seems silly to me. Yeah. And again, I've been consistent. I say it with the Democrat... Northam, the Virginia governor. Come on.
Well, what?
You know,
we're getting to a point, and I realize that most people, I would assume, and a vast majority of most people, I would assume 90% of people, just to go to the extreme with Northam or whatever, I would say 90% of people, probably, hopefully even higher, have never appeared in a picture in such a way. Right? Regardless of which person he was in that photo. But we're getting into an age where everybody is going to have grown up and have been in social media, and everybody does stupid shit.
Right. Yeah.
So everybody's going to have, even if it's not that, it's going to be something that looks like, oh, you're clearly an idiot because you were 14 when you took this picture.
Yes.
Or you're doing something that's absurd, or you're smoking weed or something like that. That shows poor judgment, which it does.
Right.
You're also a teenager or a young student or something like that, which people do dumb things. And I agree that I don't think something like that should.
Yeah, and I'll bring back to our campaign.
But I do think that should be something that can be brought. I'm okay with it being brought up in a campaign. I know that you're less okay with what I'm going to say there. I think, but I think that it should be judged in that fashion.
I mean, for me, I don't mind it. People could vote how they want, but I personally think you're making a mistake. Like, take Northam for example, right? That shows terrible judgment. And his apology was utter crap. If you want to judge him for something, judge him for the apology and the him and that was me. Oh wait, no, it wasn't me.
Yeah.
Can you still do the moonwalk? He's about to do it, and his wife's like, probably not a good idea. You're being accused of dressing in blackface. That you're all excited. That is one of the funniest political videos you ever see. Well, I was dressed up as Michael Jackson in blackface because I did a moonwalk. Can you still do it? And he just gets this big grin, like, oh no, I'm not. I probably shouldn't do it. When he looks at his wife, it's like that's so funny. It was so great. But so let's say, for me, I would say, okay, he dressed up like this. Probably.
How does someone with that political sense get?
I have no clue. That happens all the time. I'm like, oh my goodness. Because
like Anthony Weiner, like I never understood how he ever was a politician at all. Like you're clearly an idiot,
right? And so that's what it's intimidating. Like I think, let's say you would get elected to Congress, and it would have to be so intimidating the first day to be like, oh my goodness, like I'm in the same building that all these great people have been in that were some of the great political minds in history, and it's intimidating to run against people like, oh, they have this experience, but then you see some of these people, and you're just like, oh yeah, like if that person's qualified, I'm certainly qualified. That was always my theory, and like even like I tell people that are nervous going into a college course, I'm like, most of the time just look around the class and you're like, yeah, I can at least fit in with half these people. Like I'll be all right. I'm not gonna fail the whole class, right? So I'll be all right, So that's kind of how I felt with that. But yeah, so Northam, okay, he does this. I always kind of default to it's probably a joke, or if it's not something like that, like the Kavanaugh thing, presumption of innocence. But so I'm like, it's a joke, it's in bad taste, okay. So it's like, well, let's look. Does his life, other than that, show a pattern? Northam was a pediatrician in the inner city, dealing primarily with black children. Didn't really hear any accusations of him, I know how I'll show my racist tendency by helping poor black children out of health problems. It's like, I think that his life's work, and again, I dislike Northam. I'm just using him as an example of, I tend to defend that type of stuff. And like you said, we could take anything, whether it be we've all said things in context, or it could even be, if you think you're the one person that never has, anything you've done could be taken in a slight piece and shown out of context. And that's one thing. You weren't at this event, but the first campaign thing I did was in Potter County, and they started talking about, because the Northam yearbook thing was just coming out, and they were like, what about your yearbooks, and if we look in your past, with anyone, and like everyone that was there was like, oh, they wouldn't find anything on me, and I just wanted to be like, yeah, that's not true. Like, I'll be the first one, yeah, they could find stuff about me, and they could find stuff about you too. And I'm not saying they could find stuff about me because I'm such a horrible person. I just mean, I know what it's like. Like, we've all said, you've all told jokes.
We were in high school.
Yeah, you're all...
Somebody will have a yearbook that has something terrible that's in one of your
Why
yearbooks.
stop in high school even? Why don't go back to elementary school? You give a kid a wet willy, bully, you're a bully, or whatever. It's like, it's nonsense. You shouldn't be judged by stuff you did, even as a young adult, I would say. Now, if it's a heinous crime, that's different. That's clearly different. But you made a poor joke, okay. And you don't know, like, this didn't happen, but this was offered to me once. I was friends with a black guy, and the place I worked was having a work party, and there would be a kind of more higher class people than me and my friend. And my friend was like, you know what we should do? I should dress up like a slave and you like a slave man. I had the good sense to be like, I know, I'm good with that. But he, like, let's say someone that wasn't thinking, like, didn't understand the offense of that. Like, you're not racist. You're just like, oh, it would shock these hoity-toity people. The joke's not, I dislike black people. The joke's making fun of the hoity-toity people like, oh, this, you know, they don't get it. Now, again, I didn't do this. If anyone's watching, I didn't do this. But I'm just saying, now, if a person wouldn't... If someone didn't have that knowledge, does that mean they're a secret race? No, I don't think at all. I just think they didn't have the sense. Now, if you're doing that for the reasons of, yeah, I wish we'd harken back to a time of slavery, I mean, to me, it's, you know, that's why I always give people the benefit of the doubt. And, like, this is where I disagree in a lot of people with, like, Ilhan Omar's anti-Semitic statements. If I had to guess, would I think Ilhan Omar's an anti-Semite? Probably to some extent. I think that being someone who's that conflict of, like, the Israel-Palestine, there's probably some part of her that's rubbed off on. I don't think that she hates every Jewish person. I'm not saying that. I don't have any proof of that. But I think that there's probably some anti-Semitism there. However, I still give the benefit of the doubt. And so I think people are going way out of control when they're like, oh, she said something about people accepting money from AIPAC. That's an anti-Israeli trope. Well, what does that mean then? We can never say? I could say, like, you take money from Planned Parenthood, and that makes you a crappy... Or you take money from the NRA, and that makes you a crappy person. Or you take money from the Chinese lobby, and that makes you a crappy person. But I can't say you taking money from AIPAC makes you a crappy person, because that's anti-Semitism. Like, I don't know. To me, it's just...
Yeah, but if you have a fair criticism of the organization, it seems like you should be...
That's right. So that statement on its own, to me, is not anti...
Right.
Now, if she backs up that statement by being like, yes, greedy Jews, they just want money. Okay, that's anti-Semitic. But you can't... The problem is when you shouldn't be able to say, well, and this is what a lot of people are saying, well, I know she's an anti-Semite. And so that statement clearly is an example of anti-Semitism. But then don't complain when people do that to your side. Right? If you're right-wing and you say that, when people say, well, I know Trump is a racist, so when he says this about immigrants, it's just because he hates brown people. Same difference, right? That's why it's just like, I try to give the benefit of the doubt. It's like, you know, so I don't know. I think we get hung up on these words and stuff like that. What'd you think of Court AOC talking about detention centers, the ICE detention centers and concentration camps? Yeah.
It's a heated issue. Because I kind of looked into that, to the real definition, and I don't really know. Like, you know what? I know what she's going for. It's not what she's going for.
Right. You could make that case.
You could make the case that because they're detaining them without what's the word? I don't know. But at the same time, they did cross the border illegally, and it's not like they're going out and specifically rounding people up and throwing them into these.
Yeah,
now, I have issues with the way that they're taking care of some people for sure.
Right.
And I think that they should be doing a better job with that. I don't know, did you see the one thing yesterday where there was some argument in court where they said that they didn't need to provide soap or something like that?
That's crazy. I didn't see that.
Yeah, there was like some issue with it, and they were like, oh, well, we don't even need to provide soap, and they're like, yeah, you do.
Yeah, that's kind of crazy, yeah.
But
yeah, I mean, on the first point there, I'm done. So I don't think that she has a nuanced view of the word. I think even in her explanation afterwards, she was liking it to Nazi concentration.
Yeah, well, if you watch, I mean, I follow her on Twitter, and she did seem to say, like, that does not mean Nazi concentration, death camp, that they're different things. I think she's saying something that I believe is incorrect, or I think her point is, or at least I feel is incorrect. I think she's saying that this is like the first step, and that is what in the past people have done, and that inevitably leads to this.
Right.
I think it's demonstrated in most instances that is not the case.
Right.
It certainly did in Germany, but we did have concentration camps with the Japanese, right? And we did not like kill people.
Right.
Right. So.
But my problem. So I don't like the connotation of like.
Now that was way more wrong, right?
Right.
We're just rounding people up and just...
That's exactly my problem with what she said. It's not the narrative. It's not the, liking it to the Holocaust. Like,
I mean, to me, it's more like a refugee camp.
Yes. My problem with it is, she's just factually wrong. And there's no way that... I think that she doesn't have a nuanced view. But I'm trying to give... It doesn't matter what I think. I'll still give her the benefit of the doubt as if she did. And there have never been concentrations ran that the person running them were in any way just. Right? I would say that's a fair statement. And so you're literally telling people, many Hispanics, by the way, who work for ICE, like, you are a criminal, maybe not a Nazi, right? We're not saying exactly not, but you're basically a horribly immoral, unethical person running what amounts to unfair imprisonment of people.
Right.
And that's just not true. It's just not true. The implication, and so to me, the more important thing is, instead of focusing on, oh, you're belittling, the Holocaust, which if that's how you feel, so be it, whatever. But I'm less concerned about that and more concerned, then what is the implication of what you're saying, AOC? Right? So, like, is the implication just these facilities need to be better? Okay, then you need to vote for more money for border control.
Right.
Which they're absolutely against. So to me, it seems like the obvious extrapolation of her criticism
or
is...
specifically advocate for open borders.
Exactly.
Which
don't detain
as
them.
far as I'm aware, I don't know that she is on. That she might be on that, but I'm
but
not
then
aware
what's
of
she
her.
saying? That's what I'm saying. Like, okay.
Beto is.
Right.
He's on board.
So
with
if this
the
is
open border.
immoral, then what's the alternative?
Right.
Put them up in hotels, so then you're going to vote for a lot more money.
Right.
Or don't detain them. And we could see what that leads to. 92%, I think the recent numbers show, people that are let go and told to come to court don't come to the court hearing. So you're literally advocate. You might say I'm not open border, but that's de facto.
We could probably do stuff quicker, but then you also need money.
More
probably
judges, right? Yeah, like the process. And so it's like that to me is the big issue. It's like I just wish instead of people getting all hyperbolic, just be like, okay, then tell us what should we do. There's only two possible solutions: invest way more money and make the accommodations way more to your liking for them, or don't detain them.
Which I think is reasonable. I think it's reasonable to put more money into.
Oh yeah,
I'm not saying that they need to be in hotels.
Yeah, right. Which that's a worthwhile discussion, right? But the argument with the wall eventually came down because they lied so much. Walls are immoral. Well, wait a minute. You all voted for Pelosi and you voted for walls before, under a different name, same thing, same exact design, the steel slats. And so it eventually came down to the absurd argument that was like, well, we don't have the money to spend. And it's absurd for both parties at this point because they spend money on such frivolous crap. And so, my argument from the get-go is I come at this argument for I care about American citizens first, and I think illegal immigration is a huge detriment to the country and American citizens. However, I understand a lot of people on the left don't want to hear that. It's also our system's really bad for the people trying to get here. A lot of people raped and murdered, people being set under false pretenses that are then being exploited here. So, like, that's kind of reasons to take that situation serious in the first place. And that's all part of the border crisis.
And if you do really view them as refugees, you normally have refugees in a refugee camp while you vet them.
Right, that's right.
I mean...
I don't know, take everything in the intel community with a grain of salt, but there was someone just arrested in Pittsburgh who was a Syrian refugee who planned on blowing up a Christian church for ISIS. They just arrested him 2 days ago. Now, does that mean every refugee? No, I'm not saying that. But what gets me is like these insane double standards. We can't walk through an airport without basically getting filled up every which way. You can only have little bottles of shampoo and stuff, all in the name of security. Yet, then leave people coming from countries that we don't even have successful background checks just walk through the border. I mean, I'm fine with that if that's what you're going to do. But then stop checking me at the airport. What's the sense? It's like we'll check the least likely people to commit. It'd be like you go to a sporting event, right? And it's like, we're only going to check the bags of little old ladies. Everyone else, come on in. We won't bother you. Like, it's like, this doesn't make sense.
So those are the more likely ones to have bags.
Yeah, well, yeah, true. But it seems like they'd be the least likely to commit some kind of heinous crime. So, I don't know.
The one thing that bothers me with it is there are actual places where they have concentration camps where they're, like, actively rounding people up. I mean, we still have that.
Yes.
Right? Like, the Uyghurs... In China, they're doing that, like, now.
Yep.
How come that's not a concern?
And it has to do, I think, and everyone has different reasons, but I think it has to go back to identity politics and cultural Marxism. And so the idea is, the U.S. is oppressors, and so the China is oppressed by the U.S. And so you can't look at an oppressed group and say, this oppressed group's oppressing others. And so we it's the same with, like, well, if you're for gay rights, I think that the issue's pretty much settled here. I'm for gay marriage and stuff. But if that's you want to criticize things in the United States, but then you defend like governments like Iran which is clearly worse for gay people. Does that mean you bash all Muslims? No, I'm not saying that. But you just say clearly on the scale of things, the treatment of people that are homosexual in the United States far better than these other countries, yet you don't ever want to criticize those other countries. Why is that? Well, because those countries are victims. And so even though victims, you get in this, it's just craziness. It's just, but that's exactly the problem. And then we end up, women's rights is another big issue like this. So we end up, we're fighting for civil rights. You know, my theory is, and I didn't come up with this, is that so many people want to relive those historic battles to feel great about themselves, of like the civil rights movement, anti-slavery movement, that instead of going to areas of the world where that crap's actually still occurring, they just make crap up here. And so, you know, now standardized testing's racist, or, you know, whatever. Insert your stupid, trans athletes need to be able to compete with. It's just like, there's actual real crap going on in the world, you know, that we could be focused on. There's real crap going on in this country if you're interested. Mm-hmm. You know, it doesn't have to be race civil rights. You know, you could go to any poor, rural, or inner city place, and you can see a lot of work that needs to be done. But instead of that, you know, to me, it's an irony anyways. It's like, you know, go to California, go to LA. Like, let's just take a specific person. Let's listen to Zuckerberg talk about the need, how bigoted it is to want to build a wall or something, right? And because these poor people, that guy walks 2 blocks out of his house and there are people, hypodermic needles on the street and people living in squalor. So you could actually take real world action right now in your neighborhood, but instead you want to focus on the grand scheme, or we have streams where fish are down, we're overfishing and things like that, but no one wants to focus on that because they want to focus on global warming instead. You know.
And I would say, I would assume, I'm not 100% sure on Facebook, but I know other tech companies they make, to get into authoritarian countries, they end up doing things that are far worse. You know what I mean? They
like Google and
Google
China.
Specifically.
Yeah, right.
And it's like,
yeah, and that's
I don't really want to get my morals from a tech company.
That's why, like, exactly, and that's why
or any corporation.
I buy, and people disagree with me, right? That people on the left will disagree with me. Not saying you, but others will. Where I say, look, I don't think that it's a company's business to get into morality. Like, there are obvious things: don't cheat, don't break the law, and scam people. Like that sort of morality. But morality, like we're going to weigh in on abortion, or we're going to weigh in on gay rights, or to me, it's like that's not really your play. Fine, you're a corporation, do what you want. But the problem is, like, you end up making a fool of yourself. You show the hypocrisy. So Google's going to talk to us about the need, for this, that, and the other for human rights, and then they're helping China build systems to basically, like, it's really, I don't know if you've looked into it, but they have this, like, not social media, they got a score now.
Yeah.
There's a Black Mirror episode that's basically, you almost wonder if someone in China watched that and was like,
That wasn't Google that built that, though, was it? Wasn't
no, but they're definitely helping the government through their building basically a second internet.
And they have their own score or whatever, and that allows them to buy stuff.
Right.
And you have to have, and it's like the score follows you around like your social security number here, and it's kind of messed up.
That Black Mirror episode, that's exactly what I pictured, like someone being like, crap.
The one where they have the 5 stars and they just keep giving
everybody's giving themselves stars. That's definitely what it reminded me of. But so it's weird to hear these companies like get involved in crap like that. It's like, and I'm of the belief financially, it almost to me always seems to make sense that weighing in on a matter like that only has the potential to harm you. Like, for example, I don't think there are many people that will not shop at a place because you haven't made a political stance, right? So let's say you're Dairy Queen, and I'm running Dairy Queen. I'm like, someone's like, oh, what do you think about, Trump? He's a terrible person. I'd just be like, no comment. Ice cream. We're talking about ice cream and burgers here, But if you're like, oh, I have to weigh in, whatever side you take, whether it be defending Trump or saying you hate Trump, like, less people will shop at your store because they're like, I agree with you. But there are more people that will be like, well, I disagree so strongly that I'm not gonna.
Maybe.
To me, it seems like that usually plays out.
I don't know, like, for say like Chick-fil-A, I don't think it hurt.
Well, that's true, but Chick-fil-A is a little different to me though, because that was kind of how they were founded. That's like, I used to say this about music. I absolutely can't stand it when musicians will start talking about politics.
Yeah.
But if you're like Rage Against the Machine, it's like, that's kind of what you did, right? Like, so it's like, oh, okay. But if you're Taylor Swift, it's like, oh, okay. Miley Cyrus, thank you. That's clearly different. The anti-war musicians of the Vietnam era, okay, that's what they were doing.
Do you know about that Penzies? Did you hear about this? It was it is still a spice store. And then on the night of the election, or maybe the day after the election in 2016, they sent like they had it's a chain. I don't know if they exist in Pennsylvania. I don't think we have one at State College, and I'm sure you don't have one here. But they have one in Tucson where my parents live, and they sent out an email on like the morning of after the election or whatever that was just like, basically, if you voted for Trump, you have no business coming into our store. You're all idiots. Like and just like bashing, like going completely away from it, and it was very stupid in my opinion. Like I know that they got a lot of liberal people to shop there and stuff, and they probably got press, and they probably got sales online, and maybe in the end it worked out for them. I don't actually know, but I know for a fact that there were certain people that stopped going there. I'm related to some of them.
Yeah, right. I don't know. I mean, I will admit I'm talking a little out of ignorance and that I haven't crunched the numbers.
Yeah.
But it feels like, and that's what these ad boycotts like.
I mean, but there are some situations. Now that one seemed over the top, right? There seems like, to me, there's no justification for you to do that. Because he won at that point, and it's like, well, you're just an idiot now because you're just gonna piss off people,
right?
But he also got press. They also got press and stuff. So who knows?
Yeah, I mean,
but like the people, I don't know that I agree with you with the people that don't go to like North Carolina and stuff like that when they don't do business because of like the laws that they pass. I kind of understand. I actually think that's okay to do that.
Well, it's okay
because you also keep in mind that if it's like for gay, I don't remember what all the laws were. There was something
the bathroom,
all the transgender stuff. Those companies have people that work for them that are transgender, and if they go and work and set up work in a state that they weren't then before, and it's something that harms the people that work for them, then they have an active role that I think that they should protect their employees.
I mean, I could see that, but that's different than as a company coming out and saying, like, getting involved, because that you could say arguably directly affects the company, right? Mm-hmm. So, like, let's say you're a gun store. Yeah, it probably doesn't hurt you to be like, I'm pro whoever politicians. Second Amendment, right? Like, that's obviously not going to... So there's certainly, if it directly affects the company, that applies. But I'm talking more about, like you're just off the wall coming out, like the story with the pharmacy. Or, you know, you're a shoe company, you're Adidas, and you're just going to come out and be like, yeah, screw the Democrats. Like, it just seems like, we're pro-life. Like, if Adidas came out, we're pro-life. You know, or Nike comes out, we're pro-choice. I don't know how much, it just seems to me, and I don't like them acting like they're somehow moral, because I guess let me put it this way, that's fine to do, I don't care, and I don't care if it helps your business or not, maybe it'll help you, right? But all I'm saying is, once you open the door to your speaking as a corporation in some sign of morality, then you're opening the door to people being like, you don't pay your people enough, you got sweatshops in this country, you're doing things different in this country, you know.
Well,
so
they should be open to that criticism anyway.
Yeah, well, but you could at least have the defense of like, listen, we don't get, but if we're doing something personally unethical, fine. But like, for example, let me give you an example. There was a bunch of movement for musicians that were going to perform in Israel, that they were like, don't go to Israel. Israel sucks. Blah blah blah. You know, and I'm not saying that's an anti-Semitic. Right. I'm just saying, okay, so people were kind of browbeaten to that. But the people that are browbeating the other musicians and stuff, it's like, well, let's look at the places you've performed. You see this, for example, with, what was it? One of the places in Georgia with their abortion bill. Mm-hmm. And a bunch of companies are like, we film in Georgia and we're not going to, you know, Netflix or whatever is like, we're not going to film shows in Georgia anymore. And it's like, but you filmed in Iran. Like if your criticism... Right, you know what I mean? Like you'll film somewhere.
Well, did they film like a documentary? Or did they film like?
Oh no, they film like plenty of shit. Like Game of Thrones, for example, a lot of it was filmed in places where, like, I think the abortion laws are like extremely pro-life in New Zealand. A lot of stuff's filmed there, you know, and so it's like you're just arbitrarily picking. That's what it is. And so once you say, you know, if I would come on this channel and be like, I'm telling you right now, I'm not going to use any service, any company that refuses to pay their employees at the minimum level at least $15 an hour. And then, you know, grab my Pepsi and people are like, well, wait a minute, right? Like, in other words, you just wanted to crap on Nike, but here you are drinking your Pepsi. It's like, I don't get to be like, well, that's different. Well, this is more convenient for me or whatever. It's like, so what you're really trying to say is you were just looking for a reason to crap on that. And that's fine. I'm just saying, you know, back to like that Kyle Kashuv we were talking about. One of the things I thought was hilarious about that was, remember when David Hogg, he was the opposite. Those characters are
Yeah, I
just,
remember him.
you know, and he was coming out and was like, F the NRA. If you're pro Second Amendment, you have blood in your hands. You like seeing kids die. Like, that's pretty vile, repugnant stuff. And when people started to speak up against them, everyone was like, whoa, you can't go after children. And then those same people are like, but we found out Kyle Kashoff said this. Now, granted, it's a different type thing. I would argue that using the N-word
was worse, I would say.
Oh, no way.
You don't think?
Not at all.
Why?
Because saying something in a jokey context in private is
okay.
by no means worse than telling people to their face that you're a murderer who wants to see children killed.
However, I think David Hogg took it to the extreme and should not have gone as far as he has. He was in a situation where, like, his friends got killed and shit like that.
Well, so
right?
was Kyle.
But it wasn't like he was like killed by black people or something like that, right?
Oh no,
I'm saying he's specifically talking about an issue that impacted his life to a very bad way, in a very bad way.
But then the argument of you can't go after children for their political opinion doesn't fly. Then the argument's more nuanced. It's you can't go after these kids that were involved in a tragedy.
I don't know. Okay, I don't know if anybody was saying you can't go after him because he's a child.
Oh, that was a big argument. It was what's her name?
He wasn't
Laura
a child
Ingraham.
anyway, wasn't he? Wasn't he 18?
He was 17, 18.
Okay.
But Laura Ingraham, she said something about made fun of him. Was basically like you won't get into college, and she got an ad boycott because you can't go after children like that, young people like that. And it was what she said was stupid, but it wasn't like grotesque. You know, it was just like, maybe colleges should look at this transcripts a little more closely or something like that. Which I was against, but the idea that you would boycott it, you know, and Kashoff was out there saying, he went through the exact same thing and was just taking the we should have had guards there with guns, and he got crapped on.
Yeah.
You know, and it's constantly this, I'm tired of this idea that there's, look, if you open your mouth with a political opinion, I don't care if you're 12. Now, I shouldn't be like, screw you, you 12-year-old, you don't know anything, but I'd be like, this opinion's stupid. You're wrong. Like, and you don't get to hide behind it. But I was the victim of a tragedy, but I'm a young person. I don't agree with that. I'm just like, yeah, I shouldn't be insulting.
No, but what I'm saying is that I don't think he said anything to us that's wrong from his perspective. I mean, he said, fuck the NRA. Is that what you said he said?
Yeah, and he said that basically all of these politicians were bought and paid for by the NRA, and all the pro-Second Amendment politicians wanted to see kids murdered. I mean, it's nuts. It's
right, but I mean, who cares that he said it?
Well, I don't, but I'm allowed to say, you know, F off. You're wrong.
Yeah.
And then for the media to then act like this happens over and over. Like, let me give you a better example. It has nothing to do with kids. Meghan Markle could say Trump's a bigot, Trump's a misogynist, Trump's a terrible person. Trump then says in response to her, I didn't realize she was nasty. And people were like, can you believe Trump would say that about a princess? So what? We're just going to ignore that she said crap about him first? Like, it seems like this happens over and over again, where because of the people that control the conversation culturally, it's like they can attack you. This happens all the time. Like, it turns out that this guy from Vox that did the Adpocalypse, right? 2 days before he's going after Steven Crowder for calling him queer or something, whatever he called it. I don't know exactly what it was. He's saying, did you hear about like Nigel Farage getting hit by a milkshake? Do you know anything about that? It's starting in the UK now. Nigel Farage is for Brexit. They keep, if you're for Brexit now, people just throw milkshakes at you, which is assault.
Yeah.
It might not be life-threatening, but could escalate very quickly, right?
It's kind of funny.
And so, but
maybe I agree that it's assault.
And so this guy, Carlos Maza from Fox, says milkshake them all. Conservatives should be afraid to gather in public, right? That's what he says. And then he 2 days later is saying, I'm a victim. They called me mean names. It's not fair. And it's like, dude, most of these people that are crying, well, not most, a lot of people that cry victimhood the longest, they're bullies too. They're out there bullying, and they're okay with that. It's okay for me to say this. It's okay. I'll say it over and over again. But if you respond in kind, and you see the same thing with Trump. Trump called the New York Times treasonous for the story the other day. Did you read this story?
I didn't read the story. I heard you call him treasonous.
Basically, it was the New York Times. I talked about this last night, but the New York Times...
I didn't watch the whole thing.
Yeah, it issued a story that basically said that people in, like, the intel community were screwing with Russia's infrastructure.
Uh-huh.
And Trump came out and was like, this is treasonous. Basically, I guess the implication would be...
That it was released?
Yes,
okay.
Publicly, because then Russia would know what we were trying to do. But then Trump immediately comes out and is like, not that it's true, which is hilarious. But the New York Times story, the bigger part of that story, this is getting off subject a little, is that it said basically the intel officials were doing this without Trump's knowledge because they didn't trust Trump on it. That's a huge deal. If we have people basically committing...
Maybe, but I don't know how much of that stuff is always knowledge of the president.
Well, that
right?
seems to be...
Was it cyber related?
Yes, and messing with their infrastructure,
So-
like electric grids and things like that.
I think we're doing cyber stuff to people all
Yeah,
the
but
time,
think
and
of
I
it-
think they're doing it to us too.
Okay, but say this. Say Obama's doing the
Like
Iran
I
deal.
basically think we're in like an undeclared cyber war with like half the world.
Say Obama's trying to do the Iran deal, right? And he's trying to make overtures like, hey, we really want this to work out. And then it turns out a bunch of neocons that were left under Bush are basically like, screw this. We're going to send our spies in to do a bunch of... Don't tell Obama, though.
Right,
That would be bad news.
But what I'm saying is, if it was cyber stuff, he might just be stuff that he just doesn't. It's not stuff that he normally gets briefed on because it might just be part of here's something that we're doing, and then just like
I don't know.
stuff that
It
gets
seems...
done.
But either way, well, then if that's the case, then it is. If the New York Times knew about it before Trump, that's probably not a good thing. Anyways, Trump called the New York Times treasonous. He's wrong.
Yeah,
That's
well, for the
journalism.
New York
That's
Times, for
wrong.
sure, he's not.
That's wrong. I don't think it's a huge danger. I think it's Trump flapping
Now,
his big gums.
I would say if people released that information and they weren't supposed to, then that is probably true.
Maybe, but I think Trump was wrong to say it. That's all
Fair
I'm
enough.
saying. But, and the media was like, oh, here we go, Trump attacking the media. But they'll call him treasonous every day. And so to my point's just like, listen, you get the rhetoric that you use, right? And we were talking about this in the car earlier, right?
Does the media call him treasonous?
Oh, yeah, they have Brennan on and all these people all the time saying,
Like who?
he's a
who are
CNN
you?
correspondent,
Okay.
former CIA, or head of the CIA, and then you
Well,
constantly see...
that's not the media. Then that's just a guy.
Well, but Cuomo and Don Lemon and Anderson Cooper and Rachel Maddow and like all those people
I'm
do,
sure Rachel Maddow has problems.
Yeah, I mean, so it's like and then the Washington Post constantly is, So I mean, it definitely happens, and or like here's another good example. Remember when Trump like insulted that judge, which was crappy. Basically, he was like, oh well, he came from Mexico, can he?
Was that like in Ohio or something?
Oh yeah, it was like 2016.
Okay.
But and the media take on this was, you can't insult judges. The office deems that it be treated.
Yeah.
But they don't feel the same way about Trump or any of the people in his administration. Like even if you thought that way about Trump, and you're like, okay, but Trump's special because he's got such a big mouth. How about William Barr, the Attorney General? They'll slap him around, and it's constant garbage. It's like all I'm saying is I don't have a problem with it. You'd say like I think this guy's an oaf. I have no respect for him. No problem with me. But then when he responds like I think CNN's fake news, you don't get to be like I have the vapors. How dare a president say that? It's like, dude, you attack the guy every day. I don't care what came first, the chicken or the egg. You're both involved in mudslinging, so I don't really care to hear either of you cry about it. It's just nonsense to me. Stop pretending like there's some like line that it's okay for us to say whatever we want, but if the president responds in kind. Now, yeah, would you like a president not to punch down? Of course. No, I think he's right to call out the media's bias. But
I think the problem is that the media has become blurred to be media and opinion both.
Well, right.
The same thing.
There is no... The election of Trump's election has been successful in this sense. I voted for Trump because I wanted to see a Trump versus Bernie election. Not because I thought that both of them were outsiders. I'm not so sure now. I'm less sure about Bernie than I am about Trump. But nonetheless, what I did think, though, was that wasn't important, whether or not they actually were outsiders. What was important was I thought that the establishment people on both sides thought that they could potentially be outsiders. And they didn't want to lose their stranglehold on power. So I wanted a Trump versus Bernie election, even though I would have voted for Trump. I was like, well, at least, because my big issue was I wanted some potential outsider to come in so that the average person could see just how rigged the system is. And I think that Trump and Bernie both did that in spades. Bernie in the primary getting screwed, and Trump with just how, like, the media. Is there anyone that has any credibility in the media anymore? Very few people. I mean, they've outed themselves. Anyone who's objective and watches it whatsoever has to be like, this is a joke. It's just a joke. I mean, I don't know how I could, like the Russia story, how I could have more details than professional people at the New York Times or the Washington Post. They have no interest in covering what's probably the biggest political scandal in the history of the country. Like, you could say, well, I don't think it's as big a deal as you, which I don't think you do. We know this at a base level fact. Unverified evidence sourced by Kremlin agents was used to spy on people connected to Trump's campaign. Paid for by his opponents. That's a huge deal, regardless if it was done for out of corruption or out of ignorance. That's a huge deal. If that happens in 2020, there will be riots in the street. If Trump's like, well, I paid, a law firm to go talk to a former French spy, and he talked to China, and he said Joe Biden likes getting peed on in beds by hookers in China. A bunch of Chinese officials told him. And oh, by the way, everyone connected to Biden's actually secretly working for the Chinese to steal the election. So we're going to spy on his campaign. Then we're going to release the information and unmask people to the press. We're going to tell our allies that Biden's actually a Chinese agent. And we're going to use all the info we gather. People would be like, that's nuts. I'd be right there with him. I'd be like, that's insane. Even if it turned out Trump did it out of ignorance, people would say that's unbelievable. Or the people in Trump's team. And they would be right. Why is it not I'm not saying you have to say, maybe you really like Obama and you don't think he had anything to do with it. I disagree, but fine. You still would say, this is a huge freaking problem. I don't want my opponent. Trump's a maniac. I don't want him. Are we setting the precedent? This is okay? The FISA courts that came out as a result of this. I mean, this is crap. The liberals, the Democrats were with me. When the Patriot Act came around, they were against the Patriot Act.
I don't think that. You think they were? Liberals were against it.
Oh, the Democrat, a lot of them.
I mean, it passed pretty overwhelming.
I don't mean the politicians. I mean, the average, my friends, people that were anti-war, anti-Iraq war. I was Well, I was more libertarian, but I was against the Iraq war. Yeah. I was for Ron Paul, was against the Patriot Act. A bunch of liberal type people were, And then it's now what happened? We see the abuse. Facts that came out that it's just public knowledge now. 99% of all FISA applications are basically rubber stamped. That's crazy. That's every right that you think you have in the Bill of Rights, just like that.
Yeah.
Based on that. I don't care. It has nothing to do with Trump. On that level, it's even if you don't think that it was corrupt and targeted Trump, shouldn't you say, well, hey, we should fix this system? That's crazy. It could be used against me someday.
Right.
In a non-political way. And it seems like that seems to be my idea of, because I went for broadcast journalism is what I got in university. I didn't last long, a semester, and then I switched to debate. But that was the type of stuff I was interested in. The powerful, shady government and the journalists, the Pentagon Papers, outing this corruption. Where are they? It's you don't hear a peep. They're too busy talking about, we didn't like William Barr's memo of the Mueller report 2 weeks before he released the Mueller report. Who cares? They had hearing after hearing about Barr's summary of the Mueller report months after the Mueller report was available for everyone to see. We don't quite like the way Barr said this. Okay, the Mueller report's there. And I had people online, places I'm at online, constantly talking to me well, when Barr said this, blah, 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 and that's wrong, because I'm okay, show me in the Mueller report where that's wrong. Well, this guy on CNN. Why listen to this guy on CNN? Here's the report. You show me line and paragraph. Well, but Mueller said his phone call with Barr. Okay, Mueller also said everything's in the report. Show me in the report. And it's just, I don't know. I know I'm ranting, but that's, and you're right. It's to me, that's what Trump's shown. That just everything is the only time, when's Trump get praised? We bombed Syria. That's the only time I remember the New York Times. He's acting presidential. Isn't that strange? It just, to me, and in a way, it was off.
Was there a speech recently the D-Day speech?
Yeah, they did say he did good, which that was
2 things in 2.5 years.
Yeah, but it's hard to. I mean, it was a good speech, and I'm not saying it wasn't heartfelt by Trump. I don't mean that.
I didn't watch
but
it,
I always put a little grain of salt into a speech
like
that. Someone wrote that speech.
Right, he didn't actually just go off the cuff.
Right. Now, when Trump's going off the cuff and says something good, that's more impressive to me. But, okay, he read a speech well. That's great. And
yeah,
again,
but when he's going off the cuff, he's attacking usually people in America to some degree, too.
Yeah. But, for example, at the State of the Union, I thought, even though it's not policy-driven, his best moment at the State of the Union was when that the Holocaust camp survivor stands up and they're like, it's his birthday, and they sing happy birthday to him. And then it ends and Trump's like, yeah, they wouldn't have sang that for me. Because it was self-depreciating and it was off the cuff and funny. And it wasn't attacking someone else. It was him making fun. It's yeah, if he was more like that. Trump's big problem for me, right out of the gate when Alec Baldwin starts doing him on SNL, he should have just been oh yeah, I guess it's funny, but I would have said it more been in on the joke instead of being not funny, SNL's going downhill. Because you kind of take all the vinegar out of him if you're just it was like when we debate, and you debate these teams and they'd be why but you acknowledge your whiteness or whatever, and we would just be hey, well, we're not going to do that. We're not going to let you call us a racist. If you want to have a discussion, that's fine. Then once all the vinegar's out of them, It's like, oh, we don't really have much to say, But yeah, that's how I felt. So I don't know. Well, I thought Trump was a success, and Bernie was a success in the. I don't. How the people in the Democratic Party that like Bernie are still okay with the Democratic Party? Like, they really think that won't happen again? I mean, you didn't like Bernie, I'm assuming.
I didn't. I voted for Hillary in the primary.
But doesn't that raise to me it was the same way I felt about the Republicans with Ron Paul. When you saw the shadiness that was going on with Ron Paul, it's like, what does my voice even matter? So I get to pick between a couple of candidates that some elites approve.
I don't. That's just the system, right? I mean, I think they have done things to change the system now to some degree, but I do think that was the system too. I mean, I followed it really closely. I mean, that was just they had what do they call them, super delegates or whatever.
But it was more than that,
right? But also, this will maybe sound weird. Bernie wasn't a Democrat.
Yeah, that's.
So I can see why they.
But then they should have just said, "Don't run. Don't give people the false hope."
Well, but I mean, they I don't think it's on their. I don't think you're allowed to tell somebody they can't file for running for Congress or for president, right? That you can't.
Sure, they could have told Bernie, "You're not a Democrat. You can't run for our party."
You file with the FEC, and you file as you want to file.
Right.
I mean, he could run as a Republican if he wanted to, right? Now they didn't have to let him into debates and stuff,
right?
Because it's a party. But I don't buy the whole Bernie got screwed over thing. To be honest with you, I mean, he got outvoted like 60-40.
Yeah, but there's tons of stuff that was going on.
He got less coverage.
Like the one delegates were given Hillary. There was a tie, so they had to have a coin flip, and Hillary won like 4 coin flips in a row, which that's not even a big deal. But I mean, there was tons of stuff. So you had people giving DNC people that were specifically giving Hillary debate questions. You had all the stuff that was released by the Podesta and the DNC emails has constantly the party talking about how we're going to specifically help Hillary, how we need to stop Bernie.
But do you think the Republicans didn't do that to Trump? To try to get Trump not to win?
Yeah, they did, but it was unsuccessful.
Oh, it was unsuccessful.
And the reason was because, and this is the conspiracy theorist in me, at the establishment level, I don't think the establishment Republicans minded Hillary. So it was like, it's going to be Trump versus Hillary, whatever, Hillary will win. And here's 2 reasons they didn't mind Hillary. One, because they don't care, they're concerned about maintaining...
But during the primaries, at least initially, they didn't think... Even though Trump was leading in the polls, people were stupid and thought he didn't have a chance.
Well, right.
They thought what was going to happen was everybody else will drop out and and everybody will coalesce around Jeb Bush or Marco Rubio or something like that. Or Ted
Cruz.
Cruz.
I agree. So you kind of caught them with their pants down.
Right.
But I also think they didn't mind Hillary because Hillary did 2 things for them. One, it doesn't matter because they're interested in maintaining power, and that means, but that's why no real insider at the high levels of politics is ever punished, because once that facade drops and everyone starts going, if you punish your opponent, you know you're next to be punished because there's a bunch of shady stuff going on both sides. So they don't care. They have a little agreement. And the other thing is, hey, if Hillary wins, our chance in 2 and 4 years is going to go through the roof because she'll be so unpopular that then we'll get who we want in. And so I think there was a lot of that going on. But yeah, it was different with the Democrats because it was Hillary or Bernie.
Right.
Like, who was, I can't even remember the other guy.
Martin O'Malley.
O'Malley!
Yeah.
What happened to O'Malley?
He was in like 1 or 2 debates, I think, right?
Yeah, but
he actually wasn't that bad.
No,
it's just
profitable.
I don't know why he didn't get that much.
It's profitable to
compared to like now when you have people that are like in 20th place with the Democratic Party getting more.
De Blasio? What's that guy doing?
I don't understand.
Trump's more popular than De Blasio in New York City.
Really?
Yeah, that's what the polls show.
I don't understand De Blasio.
And they hate Trump in New York City, Yeah, I don't know. Everybody hates De Blasio. Like, I don't know, maybe we should all vote for him. It's like, at least we could all, he'd bring everyone together and just no one respects that guy whatsoever. But yeah, I mean, I don't know. I just think that, like...
I would actually say that I think they're trying to be too fair this time.
Well, there's way too many candidates. I mean, it was just the same with Republicans.
They got 20 people in the debate, and some of those people shouldn't be there, I don't think.
Well, it's profitable to run for president.
And it shouldn't be.
Right.
But yeah, and especially with the rules that they set up, everybody knew, hey, if I run, I'm going to get my town hall on CNN and get more name recognition. I'm going to get onto the, I'll probably get into the debates and I'll get name recognition there. And then I'll probably lose, But everybody's going to be like, oh, well, you know, it made sense that you lost because there were 24 other people running.
Right.
So, you know, it's okay. You can just run again later or do whatever you want to do
Right.
for real later.
Well, look at Beto. We were talking about, look at Beto losing against
I think
Cruz.
Beto intended to win when he came in, though, to be fair.
Oh, yeah,
I think some of the people, especially the people that have come in the last couple of months, not Biden, have specifically come in with the intention of they have no intention of
Right.
winning.
But I'm just
They're
saying,
getting name recognition.
Beto shows that even if you don't win, that recognition that you can get could really help you out.
Yeah.
Maybe for a future election or for future endeavor or whatever you have. And I think a lot of people are also running for cabinet positions or vice presidential slots.
Maybe, but
I mean?
you got to be in the game for a pretty long time for it to be because of that. I mean, you would
Oh,
have to.
yeah.
I guess that's potential, but if you... You're just checking
just
the time.
looking some comments.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I mean, so, I don't know. Like I said, the Democrats I like at this point are Yang and Gabbard. And I don't agree with
But,
a
I mean,
lot of what
neither
they
one of
say.
them's going to win.
No.
I mean, what...
If I had to pick...
What does Yang have any policy besides the universal basic income?
Yeah,
Because that's what I always hear him talk about.
That's the big thing that he's talking about, but that's an issue that is important to talk about. Now, I'm not for universal basic income, but it's at least that's see, I respect politicians that are willing to talk about unpopular things, and that's very unpopular that no one talks about. That's like, dude, we're teching ourselves out of jobs. So what happens when that occurs?
Some of us work in tech, so that'll be okay for us.
Right, and also like a lot of the stuff you remember all the
That's how I ought to make my own job.
Remember all the Malthus crap we'd always hear in debate? Now I was just reading a report, they think in like 8 years, the human population will start to peak and decline. Because as people get more technology and stuff and produce...
Well, there's lots of countries that are already... I mean, we're not declining, right? But
Europe,
our birth rate is to the point that we would. And so
they
is
want to
Japan
import...
and Europe.
Yeah, that's what's happening in Europe. But that'll eventually happen. As quality of life increases... That makes sense, because when you were an agricultural society, you needed a lot of children, you know. So that makes sense. But it to me, it's just funny, though, because it shows a lot of times we identify, something that I actually believed that I was guilty of in debate was the peak oil crap, right?
Yeah.
Like, I believed that. I really did. But what you don't anticipate is...
Who's to say we haven't hit peak
Well,
oil
yeah,
and they're just hiding it from us?
That's true, and it could be.
So they can keep making their...
But I think what people lose sight of is human ingenuity and to be able to solve problems as they occur, right? We just say, we look at things like now. If things technologically or whatever stayed the way they are now, or if growth rates stayed the way they are now for 100 years, like that's ultimately what happens. That's the flaw in the Malthusian argument. You're looking at, agricultural levels when he's writing that stuff in what, like the 1800s, and birth rates. And so you're saying, wow, if we track this, we can clearly see we run out of food. There's but you don't anticipate the changes that gradually occur. And so the reason I bring it up is because I wanted to ask you about global warming and like your issues on that. Because I think like when I've talked to people, I talked to Aaron when he came on like last year, and we talked. That's his biggest issue. And
I'd say it's pretty big for me.
Yeah, one of the things he said, he was like, we're talking about the profitability and stuff. And he's like, "Do you ever drive through Texas? Like how well they're doing when they have all these wind turbines there?" And I'm like, yes, exactly. Can't you see how that's my argument? That it will gradually change. The problem is...
I do think... I'm going to disagree with you. Well, I'll let you...
No. I'm just going to say, the problem is when we have vitriolic rhetoric, like, you have 12 years or we're all dead.
Yeah.
I mean, then you end up with plans like get rid of cars in 10 years.
Right.
And that's nonsense. That's just nonsense.
Although, if you do really think that we're all going to be dead by 2030, if you actually believe that, then you should probably be on board for banning cars like today.
That's exactly the point. And that's the problem with AOC's rhetoric on concentration camps, too. Or that's the problem when the Democrats are like, Trump's literally a Russian agent without proof. Like, if you're sitting here, you're some impressionable go-getter that wants to change the world for the good, and you're like, yeah, all Trump fans are Nazis. And what did the Nazis do? Geez, I better stop them. And I've had discussions with it. I had people on ATS, for example, tell me, there'll come a point if Trump wins re-election, it might be time to start killing Trump supporters. Said that to me, point blank, knowing I'm a Trump supporter. I'm not saying now, it's just if Trump gets enough power. That's what they said. And it's like, but can you blame them? If they believe the Bill of Goods, but he's a Nazi. His followers are all white supremacists. We're all dead in 12 years from climate change. So what I say to people like that, it's like, okay, so let's look at the numbers then. So the U.S. is only responsible for a small portion of global greenhouse gas emissions.
At this point.
Okay.
That doesn't mean...
Well, it's going to get worse. That percentage is going to gradually decline.
Well, because of China and India.
Right.
Yes.
I mean, and then presumably you'll have other third world countries that'll get industrialized.
Right. But there are other ramifications too. why I would say we should incentivize to do more to try to get ours. I mean, what is our? Do you know where we're at with renewable percent?
Like
do you remember when we were
percentage
in
of the grid?
college?
Yeah.
We were going for 20% by 2020.
Yeah, that was the
our
Kyoto Protocol. Yeah,
that was our
20%
plan.
reduction.
We
in
aren't
emissions.
at that. I know that.
No, but I do.
But I don't
believe-
think we're actually that far away from
right,
it.
and I do believe we're actually meeting what our obligations would have been under the Paris Climate Accord. I believe we're on track to meet that.
To be honest, here in this state, and you're not gonna like what I have to say here, I think anyway, the natural gas industry is it's way too cheap. Natural gas is too cheap, and that's gonna screw us, I think.
Well, I think like you're talking with fracking and things like that.
Well, not just fracking, but I mean, using the natural gas as a fossil fuel, it's so cheap to get here, and then everybody's using it, and because of that, it's pricing out the other energies here. So people,
But the
wind power,
the availability,
nuclear,
right?
like nuclear is gonna die in Pennsylvania, maybe, right? You know that they're closing a plant already,
Yep.
3 Mile Island, which granted has its own connotations, but it's my home nuclear power plant.
It's what's that show now on HBO? I haven't watched it yet.
Chernobyl.
Yeah, I bet it's good.
I've heard it's good too.
Yeah, 3 Mile Island. It's like the kiddie version of Chernobyl. But here's the thing, though.
It's not that bad because I'm not dead and I grew up near it.
Those technologies will eventually become more available and cheaper regardless of what happens with natural gas, right? It might take longer if natural gas is cheap. And the availability of natural gas, because one of the problems with fracking in that type of industry is it's a short-term fix.
Right.
So the availability of that stuff will start to wane. And so naturally the gap will, it's not just like people
But they'll keep funding it and try to fund technologies to make it so that they can go deeper and deeper or go into other states that they weren't.
Well, as long as the government's not I'm against the government incentivizing that. But as long as the government stays out, then that's what the market will do what it'll do. And
right, but I think in a situation like this, and the libertarian enemy hates me, I think that's the point. I think we have an active reason, a justification that I do actually think that we need to take steps to reduce carbon emissions. And you will say that, I know that you're saying that the United States is not the biggest one, or we're not going to be the biggest one long term, or whatever it is. But the United States has always claimed, or at least in the last 50 years or 100 years, claimed to be a leader in innovation and things like that. And because of that, I think we have to incentivize, because we would also impact China. We could sell technology to them. We could sell stuff to India, and we could sell stuff to these third world countries that will end up developing into industrial power.
Yeah, but I mean that's overrated, because it won't be like, the taxpayer's getting this huge benefit because the United States invested in renewables.
They'll get the benefit of not being dead in 2100.
Okay, but that's not going to happen.
It might.
But then okay, but then here's the
problem.
problem.
There are things that are. I mean, I'm not saying I don't actually think that we would all be dead by 2100. So I'll step back, because that is the argument that we're saying that we shouldn't say that. I do, however, think the world could be a much worse place if we don't take active steps to
okay,
prevent
but
it.
here's the problem. So this is a little nuanced, but here's my fundamental problem with this. I'm not saying you, but people say the issue is settled. You're anti-science. Listen to Bill Nye. He'll talk about if you don't believe this, you're just anti-science, and it's garbage. I will concede that the issue is settled, that the climate changes, and that man has something to do with it. Mm-hmm. But that's the end of the settled issue. Because they can't pin down. It's not like 98%. First off, they talk about a percentage of scientists. Anytime you're talking about a percentage, then kind of give me the number of how many total there is, right? Because to get a percent, percentage-wise, illegal immigrants are less likely to commit crime than native people. Oh, really? How many illegals are there? Somewhere between 11 and 24 million. Then how the hell do you know what the percentage is? You know what I mean? It's the same with anytime they talk about percentage of scientists. Like, cool, how many scientists are there that have weighed in on this? You want to talk about the percent? Or are you just saying it's generally accepted amongst pretty much all scientists? Okay, that's more reasonable.
But there's other reasons to do it too, not just global warming, right? Like you have air pollution. I'll take another one. Yeah. You know what I mean? Air pollution, things like that.
That's just it. When we focus on this issue of global warming, right? All of a sudden, there's a lot of actual, real environmental impact stuff right now that we could be focusing on. Things like overfishing. Things like, I don't know. Isn't it an outright travesty that people in Flint are still drinking like tainted water? You know what I mean? Things like that. But everyone's so fired up about this nebulous global warming, and they act like it's just, everyone agrees that this is well, we don't agree on how much of an impact man has. We don't agree on exactly how bad things will happen, how quick it'll happen, how much we could change it, and things like that.
It shouldn't matter that we agree on all of those issues directly, right? Because number one, we're never going to agree on all of those things. But I would think most people, the average person, should think that it's a good thing to make the environment better, or to use technology that will harm the environment less, at least, right?
But there's a trade-off.
There is a trade-off. I understand it costs more.
Right, and who's going to
initially.
bear the brunt of the increased cost?
Everyone would bear the brunt.
Poor people.
That's fair. You could do it in a way that doesn't do that.
That's exactly.
I don't think it would happen. But you could, in theory, do it in a different way. What would happen is, most likely, it would cost more on your electric bill, I would assume.
Right.
Which
but
would
how much more?
impact
Okay, yeah, and so you can have a civilized discussion about it, I agree. The problem is, the people that are just like, it's settled science, right? And the world's going to end. Then the problem they get into, it's like, then what step, like, when you're so certain that you have the moral high ground and that everything's going to end if we don't do what you, give you power and allow you to solve the situation, how far are you willing to go? You know, and that's the problem. So, like, and I've talked to serious people. I think Aaron's a person who truly believes that, like, by 2100 we're all dead, right? So my question is, like,
I think there's a chance of that.
Well, how far are you willing to go? If we're only 20% of the pollution in the world, even if we totally end emissions tomorrow,
well, here's the one thing.
Then we're dead in 2120?
We're going to be dead by 2100.
Okay, we will definitely be dead.
So I don't know that I'm
that's
that
like, did you ever hear the George Carlin joke about this? It's great. George Carlin's got a great bit where he's like, he's talking about plastic. He's like, you know, plastic stays here forever. He's like, how do you know that the earth isn't like sentient? And basically he's like, I really want plastic. I know. I'll create evolution to have humans to create plastic and then wipe them all out with weather events. He's like, when people talk about, you know, global warming and things like that, what they really mean is comfortable for them. That's what they mean. Now, obviously he's being hyperbolic joking, but I think there is a lot to that. And so the question is then, what are you willing to do? Right? Okay, we totally change how we are, and then we enact the Green New Deal. We get rid of cars, right? We do the most extreme stuff. It costs trillions of dollars, and people, now we have tens of millions of people that lose their job. We have, our economy's totally revamped. The government has control over all this, and we've just bought ourselves 10 more years on this planet.
All right. I agree. But if you're somebody who actually thinks, if you're somebody that is in the world that you accept that it's happening and that we should maybe do something about it, that should at least be on the table. All of that crazy stuff. I'm not saying that you don't be like, whoa, hold on a second. We should let's come up with this more reasonable plan, as opposed to, well, the science isn't settled. You know what I mean? Where people come, where a lot of Republicans are like, I don't really believe it. Like in Florida, maybe it was North Carolina, where they wrote into the laws that you aren't allowed to consider climate change when you're doing actuarial tables and stuff for insurance, despite the fact that in like 20 years, models seem to indicate, and the way the sea level has risen in those areas, the houses won't even be able to exist.
Well,
but
yeah,
they're not allowed to even.
That law would be
what a dumb law.
Yeah, that is stupid. I would agree with that. I'm on a, that's my first, but yeah, that's stupid. But I mean, I guess my point is, I'm operating on the auspices that everybody's acting in good faith, and that the models are, you know, are in good faith. Like, so everything I'm saying is under those assumptions. Right. I just don't know. Like, we have a world history that shows every government that has obtained massive power in that way and then used it for abusive reasons started off under the auspices of, but this is such a big emergency we need to take people's freedom this much, and we need to, you know.
I'm not saying that we.
Oh, I know you're not. But you're saying, well, that should at least be on the table. But, like, we could make that same argument about all sorts of stuff. We could say, if you were pro-life and you think fetuses are, then we need to seriously consider having the government in every home of everyone that gets pregnant to make sure that they're not damaging a fetus. Now, you would say, that's absurd. But that's where that could be a starting point. I would say, no, that's insane. That's, you know, it's... You know, my analogy would be this: I buy a house for $100,000 and I want to sell it, you know. And so some people say, well, you put it up for $200,000 and then leave some negotiating, and then you get more than your $100,000. But it would be like me and saying, good point, I'll put it up for $5 billion. Like, people are just going to be like, that is such an insane proposal that I don't even want to begin to come to the table to talk. You're clearly not taking this situation seriously. Like, and I think it was Mike Lee, right? He had all these. It's a hilarious video where he's on Capitol Hill and he's like, well, what are we going to do? Oh, here's a picture. We could ride dolphins to Hawaii. Since, you know, and it's like, yes, that's the appropriate response. Like, if you're not going to address this in a serious manner, and I just don't understand, like, these people, you believe the world's dead in 100 years, then it's like in debate we used to talk about this, right? Like, oh, okay, so you say if we don't pass your plan, there's going to be a nuclear war. Yep. And how soon is this war going to be? Oh, it's going to be like next week. Okay, then how the hell can your plan solve? Right? It can't. Right? It's the same thing. If you're saying we're all screwed in 100 years unless X, like, you have to put, it takes a pretty damn big leap to show us, not that things, because here's the truth. I would guess in 100 years the climate will be significantly different where a lot of people could be affected. I don't think we're all dead. I think it'll be gradual. I also think that you'll see places that are traditionally not been very hospitable to humankind, if it gets warmer, become more hospitable. So kind of our geography will shift.
Maybe.
Okay? But again,
like
that's...
Greenland or something?
Yeah, or like in Siberia, places like... I don't know. I'm not claiming to be a scientist.
But
here's what I do know. There isn't no
water.
consent... Like, these people that are hyperbolic, like, we're all screwed, I don't think they're taking in the fact that, like, those same people told us we were screwed if we didn't sign the Paris Climate Accord. Well, we're meeting our obligations. They're not taking into account that the free market... And I don't just mean the free market, because I'm not just... It is a lot to do with free markets, but it has to do with human ingenuity as well. That we are getting better.
Yeah.
And you can tell these people don't take it seriously because they're against nuclear power, which is by far the most effective clean energy. And they're against it. So you can tell they're not taking the problem seriously. And they're flying around in private jets, and they're,
But you're right about nuclear power being a good proven one, but like what I was saying, natural gas has gotten to the point that it's so cheap that now that's supplanting nuclear power, at least in Pennsylvania, right? They're going to have all these plants that they built all this time, and they're going to close because the gas is just too
but
cheap.
they'll eventually gradually reopen.
They won't reopen. They can't just turn them back on.
No, I don't mean that.
They would have to open new ones.
Right.
But I don't think we
I
will.
don't think it's like Homer just flips the switch back
Right.
on or something. But yeah, I think that you'll start to see that these technologies will get more efficient on their own. And the problem is, once we have the government intervene, then you're actually taking out the incentive for people, the actual smartest people, to be able to have proven technologies. So, in other words, I guess what I'm saying...
Why is it doing that?
Because, look at Solyndra.
Look at what?
Look at, like, Solyndra. $500 million down the drain. Because once the company is guaranteed a government contract, then the innovation goes down substantially. Look at every time we give an airline contract. Right? Like... Innovation in those worlds. Now, it's different in some things. If you're in a market that's solely dominated by government contracts, that's one thing. But if you're in a market that there's free markets going on with government contracts, once a company gets a government contract, it could get fat and lazy, and the other people that are trying to out-innovate them, like let me give you an example. Like, professional wrestling was best when WWF and WCW were going.
Yeah.
Once it's now just all owned by Vince McMahon, it sucks. Like, it's kind of, once the government gets in, you kind of de-incentivize that innovation mindset. Now, you'll have multiple groups competing for government contracts. I get all that.
Were you an NWO fan, or?
No, actually.
No?
I was started in that era, I did like the WCW better. But I was more of the, I liked Sting in the I didn't like the NWO.
I liked the NWO.
It was funny because then when I switched to WWE now, I actually became, it seemed like in WCW I was more of a fan of the faces. Mm-hmm. And then in WWE, my favorite was the Rock, the Nation Rock. And then once he was the corporate champ, when he was the bad guy, mm-hmm. That was the Rock I liked. The People's Champ was okay, but when The Rock was a bad guy, he was my favorite. And he was always fighting Stone Cold. Everyone liked Stone Cold. I was like, whatever. But yeah, but anyways, that's my take. And I think that, you start to get, when you talk to people that are like, no, the problem's that's it. And there are people, me and you know, that are very smart people that think we're dead in 100 years.
Yeah.
Right? They can't justify their position as far as I'm concerned. Because it's for example, we could see, the quality of life and the life expectancy of people in India.
Well, I would expect that we would adapt.
Well, right.
Right,
but that
but that doesn't mean we shouldn't take action.
But but the life expectancy of the people of India was I don't have the exact numbers, but basically doubled in the past 50 years, and the reason is access to energy. Now, if you look at their grid, it's a joke, man. You see, it's wires hanging down, and they are all running diesel generators and stuff, mm-hmm. which is the dirtiest form of energy you could have. But nonetheless, even that small access to energy allows to all. Now you're allowed to purify water, tons of stuff. Quality of life immensely increased, right? So we banned fossil fuels in 10 years. What do you say to those 500 million people? Sorry, you're all dead.
Well, that's why I'm saying we should incentivize and try to find alternatives here. So
But
we
if
can
we
sell
only
it to
have
them.
10 years, it's too late. That's the problem. When you talk in such hyperbolic terms.
But if we only have 10 years, what they would say, if you believe that, then you should say to ban fossil fuels now, not in 10 years. I would think. Because
I agree.
What if your calculations are off by 10 years?
I absolutely agree. So it's like, how far are you willing to take this? China, you ready to go to war? Because China ain't going to listen. China's going to say, okay, we don't care. We see this as you're giving up a huge strategic advantage of energy reservoirs. And so we're going to pollute as much as we want, and we're going to pass you up economically. And then once you get the technologies, once they're profitable, we'll just take them too. And now we're a world superpower. We've by far surpassed you as a superpower. And all the things that people talk about in the United States that they want to see better, like progressive issues, are 10 times worse in China. And the world's still going to die of pollution if you're right. So I guess we're going to war with China. Yeah, and it's like that's the problem when you talk so hyperbolically. And I think, as I said, all of this is under the auspices of it's in good faith. I don't know that it is. On that, when it comes to that, for two reasons. One, the same people telling us this now were telling us in the 70s we're entering another ice age. The exact same people, same scientific organizations, same liberal environmentalists. Ice age coming. I mean, now it's warming. Like, how were they so wrong then? And now we just have to take their word for it?
I would think that you will find that computers have become far more advanced in the time frame. And
it was certainly not perfect.
Right, but modeling of systems, which I would consider the climate to be one, as a systems engineer, are way more effective on a computer.
I would agree with that.
And you can do Monte Carlo analyses, or whatever the plural is of analysis. And there's been so many of them, and they can do so many of them. That's why there would be an error range too, right? But
30 years from now, the models will be much better than they are today, right?
True.
So what if the conclusion's the exact opposite 30 years from now?
But we can here's an argument to what you're saying, though, that what I previously said. Even in the 70s, if we were heading for an ice age, or if we believed that we were incorrectly heading for an ice age, we should have still, and I believe we did, take actions to reduce fossil fuel emissions.
Well, that was the reason.
We know that it's bad for the environment to do so.
Right, but that's not an honest argument, because the argument is that the emissions increase the temperature. And so the argument is, even if we're heading to the ice age, we know that the fossil fuels hurt the environment. I'll concede that, right? That could be both those things. But if it's warming and we're going to an ice age, then maybe the warming's good. Right? The greenhouse gases would be good in that world. So it
would still be bad in other perspectives.
Okay, fair enough.
I mean, they passed the Clean Air Act and stuff back then.
But that's like saying, people with criminal tendencies, you know what it is? It's gluten. And then you're just like, that's horseshit. No, that's not true. Gluten's still bad. Get rid of the gluten anyways.
I did read that 99% of mass murderers have eaten bread at some
point. Yeah,
I've
heard pants. Yeah. That's why I'm wearing shorts. They don't wear shorts. Proven stat. True. Mass murderers don't wear shorts. They're briefs people too, just so you know. Yeah. But no, so I don't know what to think. And there is definitely an incentive, and we could see that there have been models that were incorrect, right? And there's definitely an incentive, both a societal and cultural incentive, if you're in that group, to say the global climate change is a big thing, and there's definitely an incentive as far as financial incentives. Al Gore was telling us their places would be underwater right now. And that was wrong. Now, the argument you're giving is, but still we can curb fossil fuels. Okay, but then that's true. But that's why we need to have a reasonable discussion, because how do you curb them?
Right, but we aren't having a reasonable discussion because one of the parties is being specifically not allowing it to happen.
Well, I don't know about that. I mean, there's definitely people that are... But I think that I'm granted, we're coming from opposite ends of the issue.
And there are people, and I understand that people are bought but with money being in politics, that oil is one of the big players.
Yeah, but both sides.
With the money in politics. Oh, I'm not saying it isn't. But the Democrats, the mainstream Democrats, really haven't actually actually done anything on it either.
Well, right, they're leaving the conversation.
Now they're talking about it, but they're also not in control. So it's easy to talk about stuff when you're not in control. Right,
but that's what's not, how can you have a serious conversation when that's the angle you're coming from?
Now, in fairness
Conversely, if the
in
Republicans...
fairness to AOC, I think if she was in control, she would actually do some of the stuff she's talking about. But
But there are a lot of people that I consider reasonable, smart people that are for that sort of drastic action, and I just think it's insanity. You're basically, and it's always, every time. I've yet to hear any of these proposals that aren't like the poor and the middle class accept the brunt of it. Every single time. It always seems like the solutions to the problems always give us more control and poor people pay more. And my thing is, you better be damn certain that you're right then, if that's the case. Even if it's just incremental or small amounts of control. Like that it just seems, I mean...
So I'm still not saying control.
Well...
I would say incentives to other industries to try to, like, give money to research programs to find ways to either make alternative energy sources that we already know about, or find new ones, or improve them and make them more efficient. I would think.
But don't you think that there are already companies that are doing that?
Yeah, there are. Absolutely.
So, like, if the problem's if emissions are gradually going down, and we don't think that it's going to be as catastrophic as people are saying, we have 10 years, then, one, what's with the hyperbolic rhetoric that some people would use to achieve great power? And second, how much do we give then to these companies? How much of tax dollars go to companies? You know what I mean? Like,
yeah.
Now,
so I'm a probabilistic guy.
Okay.
All right. I've admitted already. I don't think that we would be dead by 2100. But as we said in debate, try or die, right? Like, there's a chance that we could be dead by 2100. And I'm not saying that we throw out the whole system. I'm saying that we try to take incremental steps
I think there's a chance that taking those steps could lead to an authoritarian dictatorship that says, in the name of climate change, we need to control every aspect of your life. So try or die, don't do it. Like
But like, that's a completely different thing. I'm not saying take over the industries.
To me,
I'm saying give money to stuff, which we give money to stuff all the time.
Well, the rhetoric to me mirrors exactly the rhetoric you see when, like, the war movements, right? I gotta go into Libya, gotta go into Iran, gotta go into Syria. It's the same. It's this existential boogeyman threat that if we don't go in there, proof be damned, just trust us. A bunch of people smarter than you say that we're all screwed if we don't do this. And, like, yeah, I get it. There's going to be reasonable people like you that are like, hey, I'm just suggesting giving some money. But that's not going to be the prevailing voice. There are people...
That doesn't mean it's not the middle ground.
Well, it could be a middle ground. But I'm just saying, they're never going to then say, oh, okay, we're incentivizing these companies. Now let's take that incentive back. It'll always be more. Now we got to do it more. Now trust us, the figures are showing that we need more investment into this. And then, like, this is how
But it isn't always more. I mean, we do this all the time in industries, right?
Yeah, but we don't do it all the time because we say the end of the world if we don't do it. And the problem is, this is exactly how Stalin started up. Just a little step here, just a little step. And then each little step further, it was like, that's the problem when you're talking about, well, it's the end of the world. It's to me, it's the same as war rhetoric. Well, you had to sign the Patriot Act, because if you don't, you're all going to die. Like a dirty bomb, nuclear weapons. Terrorists could get nukes. So some Russian agent could sell terrorist nukes. Like all the crap you hear in debate. And we made fun of all that, right? Like debate, for those of you who don't know, in debate, every scenario ends in nuclear war or the end of the world. A round of debate will come down to, okay, if we do your plan, we solve 4 nuclear wars, but we cause 3 nuclear wars. And and I feel like that's exactly what's going on with the climate change debate.
So let me take a step back. You believe that climate change is happening, correct?
Yes.
You believe that it's probably a bad thing?
Yeah.
Okay.
But I don't know that it's solvable, period.
That's fair. But you think that if it is solvable, this is the libertarian in me that's still going to be mad. But I'm trying to be like just take it the opposing view to some degree. Of you, not of me.
Right.
Fully. Where was I with that?
I think it's a problem. It's a negative.
Yeah. You think it's a negative.
And then you said something about liberty.
The government. But you think the free market, if it's solvable, you think the free market will solve it?
Majoritarily, yes. That doesn't mean that there's no room for government intervention to some degree.
Right. But here's my argument as to why it may not. It hasn't yet, right? And if the things that are cheapest are the things that are the ones that do the most damage, then why would it ever? The free market wouldn't. It seems like that's why there's a place for something other than the free market to.
But because the
Step
problem is gradually getting solved. The products are coming. So it's not as if it's a zero-sum game that the fossil fuels will always exist and there will never be an alternative. We can see that's not the case. And even with the fossil fuels, they're getting cleaner now. And it also has the potential to, that intervention to actually, one, it almost always is used to harm poor people the most. So the cost of energy and stuff will eventually increase, whether it be through taxation or something. It seems like it'll harm poor people the most. And second,
But
it has the potential to become more invasive.
I realize we haven't hit peak oil, and maybe peak oil is not going to happen. But at some point, we're going to stop getting as much natural gas, at least in our area, right?
Right.
And that's probably not that far away, I would think. I mean, I guess I don't know because I have no idea, to be honest. So
But here's the thing.
But at that point, energy costs will skyrocket here, and that will disproportionately affect poor people, as you're saying.
But this is what I'm talking about. What you're not taking into effect is there are people in the energy industry that are looking at this.
Right.
And they are going, there's someone that could say, even if you're in natural gas right now and say, like, I don't think it's going to last forever. There will be a glut in the market. If we start investing in technologies knowing that glut's going to occur in 5 years, we're going to be the big dog.
Right.
We're the only game in town. So it's not just like they're going to be like, pump, 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 pump. Oh, crap. We're out of natural gas. Now there's nothing I don't believe that'll happen.
Now, I'll say one other thing for the free market that we have here that I think most states don't have. Do most states have electric choice? Or is that
I
just
don't
us?
think so. And I think that's a great idea.
Yeah, so I don't now because it went too expensive. But for a little bit I was paying for like to use wind power or whatever, right? For a while I got a pretty good rate, and then it kind of went really, really crazy, and they had some deal that it could go up 30% every month, and they decided that meant it goes up 30% every month, and I'm like, okay, that's not gonna last.
Right.
But I think that's a good idea, and I think more states should have that, because I think that all these people, if they are, including myself, should, if this is what we believe, we should be doing that.
Yeah, I mean,
should be.
Yeah, I agree.
And I suspect a lot of people have this option and are not doing it, just like me.
Now, if I can give arguments to your side of the argument, one, in a lot of ways we do subsidize the fossil fuel industry.
Mm-hmm.
That should be eliminated, right? I agree with that totally. Second, we certainly subsidize other industries.
And they screw over people in Pennsylvania, too,
right,
by not paying the land, what was the land fees or whatever
Yeah,
it was?
you're right.
Yeah.
And here's what I've always said about fossil. So consider this. Like, ANWR, the oil reserves, for those of you who don't know, this has been a debate for 20 years. There's this wildlife preserve in Alaska, and it's supposedly got a bunch of oil fossil fuels in it. And so there's always a debate, should we drill these reserves or not? And the environmentalists...
Did we ever make a decision on that, or are we still up in the air?
I thought we drilled some of it.
I was going to say, I thought we drilled at some point.
But that's kind of the argument. It'll hurt the environment if we drill, and there's good arguments on both sides, I would say. So picture, that's land owned by you and me. Government land. That's owned by the people of this country.
Whether or not the government should own land is a different issue.
Well, right. But it is. It's a national park. A wildlife
Yes,
preserve.
I agree.
So we pay, let's just say BP, I don't know, some oil company to go in and drill that. Then they sell that oil to us. How does that make sense? Isn't that our oil? Yeah. That would be like, I have trees in my backyard, I hire someone to cut them down, and then they sell me the lumber. No, it's my lumber. I just pay for the process of you. Now you might say, well, if they weren't allowed to sell it back to us, then they'd charge more. Okay, fair enough. But how is that oil theirs once they pump it? I don't get that. To me, that's a form of subsidy of the fossil fuel industry. You know, and so there's plenty of shade. And like I said, even though like farms are subsidized, so if I'm against subsidies, then of the alternative energy, then if I'm to be logically consistent, I should be against farm subsidies.
One of which is the ethanol subsidy, or corn subsidy, which in theory should help ethanol, but I would argue that would be a failed subsidy from my perspective.
Day, everyone was like, when we were talking about pico, ethanol was like going to be this great savior.
Yeah.
Now it sucks.
It's actually better than it was back then. It's gotten a little bit better. So back at the time, remember we had a card that said that it was less energy efficient to use ethanol because you used more fossil fuels to get...
Right.
You use like 1.07 gallons of fossil fuels or whatever to get a gallon of equivalent of ethanol. I don't think that's the case anymore. I think it's a little bit more efficient, but I still think it's a dumb... I think it's proven to not be as useful as a technology as they were hoping when they...
When was this, 2004?
Yeah, that was probably the energy.
And I remember thinking back then, like, it would be so difficult, though, to get this to start to be used. Now it's everywhere.
Yeah.
like 20% or whatever.
Yeah.
But it was like that. I mean, it happened fast. I don't remember like a big. It just seemed to happen. One day you went to your local pumps and it was like 10% ethanol or whatever.
15%, but that's because it's subsidized. I'm sure that makes it a little bit cheaper
right.
for them.
But it just happened. Now, at the end of the day, the plan you're offering, I would probably be opposed to, but willing to compromise somewhat. But I just think that that's not what we see being discussed. And it's one of these issues again where it's a zero sum. It's like you're either for us or you're immoral. And I just don't buy that. And I think that...
But that's the problem with society in general.
Well, I know. But
everything.
I think specifically what we see happening is we're missing, we focus so much on the grand picture that we look the little things. This guy I like, which I don't know, a lot of people dislike him, Jordan Peterson, which by the way, he just debated Zizek, which was...
really?
It's
Zizek's alive?
Oh yeah, Zizek's kicking, man.
Oh.
Yeah, it's funny too, because no one liked the debate. Because what happens when you have two people like that debate is they basically don't say anything that matters. They're arguing over some nuanced thing that no one really cares about.
Right.
But to them, it's really important, Sam Harris and Jordan Peterson's debate on, God
that was half of our debates in a nutshell.
Yeah, right. Exactly. And the funny thing was, though,
but
if you look at Jordan Peterson and look at Zizek, and you were to boil them down, basically you would get this. Kind of right-wing, Peterson's kind of a right-wing conservative philosopher. It's not really the case. Zizek's kind of a postmodernist communist. Mm-hmm. Also an oversimplification. And so you'd be like, oh, they're going to disagree on everything. They agreed on 98% of shit. Like, they just did. Which I thought was hilarious. And they kind of both came up like, I basically respect the other guy. Now, Peterson makes a huge blunder right out of the gate because he's like, well, I really didn't have time to read his writings. Well, that's not good. Right? Like, I get it. So he just kind of was attacking communism in general, and Zizek's like, well, that's not exactly what I'm endorsing. But anyways,
So, just briefly, I don't know why this is... Speaking of strange bedfellows who seem to agree with each other on things more than you think, have you noticed any of the Supreme Court decisions?
Right.
Like Ginsburg and Gorsuch seem to be on board with each other on
it's
things?
It's really weird, right?
Which I like that.
Is hopeful,
that
right?
is
Because you're
hopeful,
like, well, at least, even if I disagree with their decisions, they're not ideologues. They're at least saying, hey, I'm willing to, I like that as well. But anyways, Peterson, one of the things he says is, and he gets mocked for this. He's like, I tell students all the time, like, what can you do to make a positive impact? Clean your room. And the people are like, what? He's like, you can't change the world until you change yourself. And if you have things at your base level, right, that you have problems in your life, you can't go out and change the world. It's not going to work that way. So you need to start making positive changes in your life and, build yourself up so you could be someone your family relies on, and then someone that your friends rely on, and then someone your community relies on, and then someone your nation relies on. But if your family can't rely on you, how can your country? How can the world rely on you if your family? And I think there's a lot of truth to that. And to me, that is kind of what we're talking about with, there is so many at the local level pollution things that go on. Not just in my community, I mean everywhere. Mm-hmm. And then, we focus on this grand picture of, we want to change the world, global warming. And we overlook things like the streams getting overfished and polluted or, things like that. Those are real changes that we could be making right now. But instead, we just want to focus on, you take the big bite of the apple right out of the gate. Or, we want to talk about the wealth gap and just be like, we need to solve all the wealth gap instead of being like, how can we help this inner city community right now? What can we do here? And oftentimes, hey, that's Piper moaning there. Oftentimes, Peterson also talks about this. I haven't read this book, but I feel like if I see a YouTube video, I know what I'm talking about. He says Orwell wrote this book called Road to Wigan Pier, and the first half of the book is Orwell. They used to, what do they call them, like serials or whatever, the way they used to write books? Like Dickinson did this too, where you just release a chapter in a paper a week. And so he's writing for the Socialist of London or whatever. And the first half of it is he basically goes to this place where this coal mine is, and he lives amongst these coal miners, and it's basically the most dreadful life you could ever imagine. And so it's basically a socialist argument, like the workers are getting screwed. And they are, and he talks about how terrible it is. And then the second half of the book is, he's like, so I go back to the city and I'm dealing with these socialists, and I started to get the very nagging feeling that the socialists didn't care for the poor people. They hated the rich people. Yeah. And I that's kind of what I think a lot of, even I see that in the climate change debate. It's not, I think I'm not saying you. I'm not saying a lot of the people I know, but it's not being approached by good faith on either side.
I think the wealth gap stuff, that's what that is.
Oh, yeah, certainly.
Arguments.
Oh,
because, yeah.
I mean, it's like...
I mean, people make a big deal about how, like, the super rich are way richer, but the poor, the people that they act like I don't know, that they make... I know that there are some poor people and there are people that are in bad way, but most people that are poor by our definition today, like, have food.
Right.
Which
I
is,
mean, the poor in our country have an obesity problem.
right.
Like, that's... No, that
It's still a problem.
That has to do with cheap food being unhealthy food.
Right.
But it's
But
food.
they're fed.
You know, and I'm sorry, like...
Which is better than 100 years ago, for sure.
You know, I'm sorry, and I've been someone who's been borderline poor. I've been poor, but not like I've never went without a meal. I don't know if you can tell that, but it's like even to me, what would be if you just look at the numbers? That's family in poverty. Had a PlayStation, had several TVs. You know, I mean it's different, and yeah, like there seems to be this idea of
and I mean they can suck, right? Because you don't have money to do everything you want to do, but.
And there's a problem. Like, there is a problem with the wealth gap no matter how you slice it.
Right.
Even if tomorrow, let's say, what was it? Did you ever see the South Park where the aliens land and they got all the space cash?
I don't know that.
Oh, it's a great
one.
one.
But I don't remember.
Randy puts something in his Stan's Pinewood Derby car and it opens like this portal so these aliens show up. And it's like a criminal alien and they end up killing the criminal. And they go on his ship and they're like, "There's space cash!" Like, and so the world takes this space cash and everybody's rich, you know? It's a hilarious episode. But, like, let's say something like that. We find rare minerals that make, like, the energy production ceases to exist, you know?
Right.
And so we're all wealthier. So, by 100-fold, even the poorest is now 100-fold more wealthy. But the gap increases.
Right.
Right? There's still a problem with that gap, even there.
Right.
But the question is your solution going to shrink that gap by bringing us all down? What are you more concerned with, the gap or the people at the bottom?
Right.
And I think there's a lot of people that are more concerned with the gap.
Yeah, I think
and
there
I
are
don't
too.
get it.
Yeah.
And on this line, like I was talking last night about reparations, I think that there's this problem when it comes to privilege that I don't think anyone ever talks about significantly enough. So we have white privilege or straight privilege or male privilege or U.S. privilege or Christian privilege, whatever, all this cultural Marxist garbage, you know, and they talk about this privilege. But what they don't talk about is most of the people talking about this are like in the United States. First off, you want to know what real privilege is? If you're alive right now, you're 99 in the top 99% of most privilege, or 1% of the most privileged
if you're
ever.
If you're in a legitimate country. Sure.
Even though to be in poverty in a poor country.
Well, if I don't know about that.
Oh my God!
If you're in one of those countries where you're starving or something like that.
But even your chances still, like when you look at like human history, millions of years of human history, where it was like the lifespan was like 21. You're fighting, you know.
Yeah.
You're being sexually assaulted and it's not considered immoral when you're 5 years, you know, animal, like you know. So in that sense, and then if you're in a first world country, you're basically in the 1% of the 1%.
Right.
If you're alive in a first world country today, even if you're poor, that doesn't mean, you know, whatever. So, like, we're in the top, let's just say, hypothetically, we're in the top 98% of luckiest people. So when you're talking about white privilege, it's basically this. The person who's 98.2% privileged complaining about the person who's 98.3% privileged. And it's like, that's fine. You might have some points. But really? That's what we're going to do? That's the big debate of our lifetime, the 0.1% here? It just seems nonsensical. Like, isn't there, like, and that's one of the things, the more we focus on that type of crap, even if your issue is climate change or something I disagree with, your time's better spent discussing that than this idea. All you do is you just make people vindictive, and I don't get it. Like, the privilege conversation, it makes no sense to me. I don't know. I mean, what'd you think about, I'm assuming you don't like the fact that reparations are a big topic of the Democratic Party right now.
Well, see, right before, oddly enough, before you posted your thing, actually, I might have seen that you were going to say that it was going to be reparations or whatever. I did read, like, I had read a couple of articles. And the problem is, I think that, similar to, like, the Democrats saying, like, all the Democratic candidates say, like, oh, yeah, I'm for the Green New Deal, where they don't mean I'm for everything that AOC says. I'm for, like, something that is green, but they don't really want to dictate it because they can just say I'm for Green New Deal, even though they aren't really. I think it's the same thing with reparations. I think some of them are like for things that what I would consider to be reparations, they aren't reparations. They're
Right.
like fairness things, like I had said last night about like funding schools better that are like in
Right.
cities that, or ending the fact that property tax funds schools. That's not reparations in my mind. I think it's something
Right.
that could help the black community, but I think it's something that is fair to do. But I don't consider it reparations. I think that's just
And it should
what
be
we should do.
race-based.
It should be
right.
we should be spending probably about the same amount, or maybe dependent on how the society or the cost of living is, or something
Right.
somewhere about the same on every student in the country, no matter where they live. If they live in a
That's
crappy
right.
area,
It
or a
shouldn't
good
be
area.
race-based
Right.
at all. Yeah, I agree with that. But that's not reparations.
I agree. That isn't. But some of the candidates are apparently saying that and saying that that's what
I know.
that's
And
reparations.
this is another a clever trick of changing definitions to fit, like the word feminist. You know, it's like, yeah, you change it to what it's convenient for you. I mean, for me, like I was saying last night, we've constantly. Let's just say hypothetical then. Like, you set someone down, you know, that's for reparations, and you would just say, give us. It's like illegal immigration. You're just like, okay, you're in charge now. Give us the number then. What is it? Give it. What does reparations look like? Give us the number where you could say, I'm confident that this amount, whether it be a financial amount or this system that we set up or whatever, this will finally solve the abuses of slavery. This is it. This corrects it. What's the number? Because I'll guarantee you, if that was implemented, 10 years later they'd say, wow, that's still not the end of it. That was a good first step.
Mm-hmm.
But now we need to go further. And it's the same with illegal immigration. Okay, what's the number? Give us, what is the final number of the population of the United States that we can handle? Bringing in basically no skilled immigrants. At what point can we say, okay, it's enough's enough? And they can't give you a number because it's garbage. And they know it. And just like they know the reparations conversation is garbage. It's red meat. You know? Anytime, it's the same garbage that I have a problem with socialism, which is if you're struggling right now, it's good to hear someone tell you, we're going to give you stuff. It might not be good for the country, and it might not never happen. But it's good for votes. You know, and that's, like, if I was someone in the black community right now, I'm with you 100%. Be like, reparations? What are you talking about? Like, the number one cause of death for people, our young people, is homicide. You know, like...
the drug war.
Right. Like, I don't want to hear pie in the sky. That's, I guess it's a similar theme to what I'm talking about with climate change. It's like, if I was in Flint right now, I'd be like, yeah, can I get some drinkable water before we're worried about solving the climate 100 years from now? How about we solve this water crap now? It's the same if I was in the, like, inner city black community. I'd be like, yeah, we get it. You're trying to pander for votes. Can we actually get some real on-the-world crap going, or on-the-street-level crap going on here? It just seems insulting to me, you know? And the pandering could happen on the opposite end, right? You could have, theoretically, some South will rise again, you know, Confederate Southern, or, you know. And it's like, sure, that's a pie-in-the-sky garbage. You know, the U.S. should pay reparations to the southern cities for, you know, destroying there's a movement of that.
Is there really?
Yeah, it's small, but yeah, there are people that still say that the North owes the South money for coming through and
We didn't
raising
start
the
the
city.
war.
That's it. Wasn't our fault. This is kind of a maybe not the best thing to do, but there's a Doug Stanhope. He's one of my favorite comedians. He's just like, don't you love when people say like, well, you know, the damn French. If it wasn't for us, the Germans would have handed them their ass in World War II. And he's like, really? That's what we did? We were garroting Germans in ditches over in France? That was what's going on? No, we got drunk and went to McDonald's and got a McChicken sandwich. He's like, isn't it funny how people say that? Like, we saved them. Like, sure, buddy, you did a lot there, you know. But we'll have to wrap it up here in
right.
like 5 minutes because I got to pick up the wife. But yeah, there's a lot to talk about. I think, though, that one of the things that both of us can agree on is you got to be able to have civil discussions, even if people disagree. One of the problems is everyone that wants to talk with me predominantly agrees with me on everything, and it's like, it's just not as productive. It's like, I guess. And I think both of us can attest to this. We have tons of friends, both more left and right of us, that we're like, we think that they're silly.
Oddly enough, that might be. So I think, like you said, we're both basically in the middle, just in the middle, but not quite in the middle, but to one end.
Right.
But we also both like to argue with people to some degree, and that might be why we ended up in the middle, because that way we could argue with everybody.
That's right. That is true, and that's something that people want to. We were talking about Twitter. The problem with Twitter is you only see the people you follow, and generally you follow people that you agree with, so you kind of have this insulated
But
bubble.
now I get mad at the people I agree with.
Me
because
too.
They're ridiculous in the way they agree with them.
I think that if I had to I really believe that, like George Carlin, this one book he wrote, he starts talking about all the reasons he doesn't want to be considered part of humankind, right? And he's like, just listen to a bunch of crap. And then he ends it, he's like, and maybe someday we'll solve all this crap. I still don't want to be part of you. And like, I feel like there's a part of that in both of us, like just contrarian. Because we were talking about, like, I'll do this YouTube channel, and I'm talking about predominantly coming through things and the conservative defending Donald Trump and stuff. And I think a big reason I do that is because I see every media around, most media that's prominent is the opposite. Right? But then when I'm local and I'm talking to everyone's a Trump supporter, I'm like, well, what about this? Trump did this. I didn't like this. What about this? And I do have some of that in my channel as well. But I think there is part of you that's just like, I just want to argue. Like, we're not, I don't think we're disingenuous. I don't think we're coming,
I think we're saying what we're saying, but I also think it framed our...
Yes, and
to get into that point because we wanted to argue with people.
Right, and you understand that difference isn't a bad thing. When they it's so funny. Everyone talks about diversity. The only diversity that matters is diversity of thought and action, and that's what we're like. Yes, that's what arguments come from. You put 5 people in a room that disagree on things. Guess what? There's going to be an argument, but that's real diversity. Out of that argument comes good ideas. At least
if it's
entertainment.
Civil.
Yeah, if it's civil, yeah. Or it could buttress your own ideas and things like that. So I hope that comes across. And I do think that one of the things we are running on is the idea of civility. Now, look, there are people in Congress right now, if I theoretically was to get elected someday, that I really don't like. Like, I don't have to say names right now, but you still treat them with civility. I ironically think that's what Biden was trying to say ham-handedly the other day. And it's like, yeah, I agree with him. Like, even people that... No.
But the problem is the only demographic
that
agrees
like
with
Trump.
him are the old.
He says things in it.
Which I agree with it too, but you know what I mean? Like,
yeah.
Our generation seems to not be on board with civility for some reason.
Well, it's been ingrained into us.
Yeah.
So, all right. Well, we're gonna head out. Thanks everyone for watching. I will be at a Willie Nelson concert tomorrow, so I won't be doing much. But thanks for watching, and we'll talk to you all later. Oh,